my studio and welcome to a 3-hour video on floral design. It's a video that we actually made earlier, had some audio problems, so we decided to go ahead and do it over again. I think it's going to be a better video for it. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my Watercolor Fun and Free book. Now in my book, Watercolor Fun and Free, approximately a third of the book is dedicated to floral design. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you 3 variations on a very specific way to paint floral design. In fact, it's the one you see right here, where we actually paint the flowers, then we mask over them, and then we do the background. And the background is done wet into wet, so it gives the illusion that this is a really free way to paint, when the reality is it's in a style of painting where you're very much in control. I'm going to show you 3 complete variations of this lesson, and as I said earlier, the tape will run approximately 3 hours long. But if you want to just breeze through the book, here's another example of the style that we'll be doing. There's a lot of good information in here that I think you'll find very helpful. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to the 3 styles of painting that I will be doing in the video. We're going to start out with where there's no breakout, it's just the entire paper, and it's kind of interesting. That's how I did the cover of the book. So you can see this is the actual painting, and that was cut down to become part of the cover. So it's really nice because you can get a strong color dominance. You can see I went for a very cool dominance on this particular painting. And I'm having a lot of fun with different shapes. Now this is 1/3 of a piece of paper. So if you cut it the 30-inch way into 3 10-inch shapes, this is what I call 1/3 of a paper. And here you can see I've gone into what I call ditch flowers, the lupin that we see a lot around here in the springtime. Some of them were painted in shadow. This was done in the background wash. This was done in the first wash where I masked over it. But it's really fun to do a blending of flowers. I will be doing this subject in our second demonstration. And in the first demonstration, I'm going to do sunflowers. And this was really, really fun. I painted this in a pub in Ireland, and we had quite dark. I was in the dance hall, and it was quite dark. So when I painted this, I can't believe how dark the background got. When I walked outside to look at it in the full sunlight, it was quite it was pretty exciting to see all the excitement. But you can see I'm trying to suggest that there are sunflowers in the background, and then I tried to punch out my darks behind my lightest lights, and tried to show the illusion that the sun is coming from this side, so all my leaves have the light going into the dark, light going into the dark. So we'll be talking about all those techniques. This is just another subject, the Morning Glories, subject I dearly love. And one of the points I want to make about this style of painting is you can paint any subject. We happen to be working with the idea of floral design, but as we go through here, you'll see anything will work. This summer I had a lot of fun painting koi fish, so we actually painted the fish first, masked over them, and then did this really fun and free background, trying to give the illusion of a strong feeling of light and rocks and fish under the fish and shadowy fish. It was really a pretty fun lesson. Now in my second demonstration, I'm going to take the same subject, only this time we're going to work with the concept of a breakout. So you can see where I have this star of the show flower. It's partly got a background and partly breaking out into the white edge of the paper. And so this is a more traditional deal where we have just a rectangle breaking into a rectangle. You can see I did have a little extra fun by drawing into some of the margins. You might like that idea yourself. And this one here is the subject I'll be dealing with during the second demonstration, but I'm going to do one just a little bit smaller. But I'm going to be doing the coneflowers, the black-eyed Susans, and the poppies, and then I try to show that whole cycle of life. So you're going to see everything from the little bud into the full flower into what happens when all the flowers fall off. Here's another subject. You can see I've illustrated 5 children's books, and the one book that I did on the 12 Days of Christmas, I actually painted this subject first. In this case, it happened to be the 4 sleepy bears. So I painted the bears first to be sure I was happy with them, and then I masked over them and then painted the background. So it's just a fabulous way to paint just about any subject you can think of. Now we've got one more here. This is a subject I've been having a lot of fun with this summer, and that is painting fruits and vegetables, and the peppers in particular. They were a very popular theme. So here you can see we've got the star of the show again, and then we've got all these fun little peppers dancing through the paper, forming a horizontal thrust. These big peppers coming down as a strong vertical thrust. So we're trying to weave together this composition of vertical and horizontal. And then on top of that, we've got the shape breaking out into the white shape. Lots of fun to do and incredibly easy. I think you're going to be so pleased with your results. Now these are all examples of what we'll be doing in the third part of the lesson. So instead of doing the background all painted or breaking out into a rectangle, each one of these is designed a little bit differently. Here you can see I've kind of picked a formula of doing the 1, 2, 3 white corners, and then trying to get a zig and a zag going through the picture. Here's another one with 3 white corners, again coming down with a zig and a zag. Lots of fun to do. And you can see how exciting the backgrounds can be. Because all of this is protected by masking, you have all this freedom just to flow the color around. So generally what I try to do is I try to get the color of my main subject, in this case the pink poppies. So I've got the pink in the background. The blue was intentional to provide a contrast to the light flowers. And then of course the warm yellows, just to kind of give the feeling of sunlight. This one now is in a little different format. This is what happens when you cut a piece of paper in half the long way. So this provided a really interesting format. You can see again I'm working with the 3 white corners, coming down with the zigs and zags, and leading your eye through. And every time you design these, they're all a little different. It's just way too much fun. How much do you want to break out? A little teeny tip or the whole flower practically? So you just get into a lot of variation. Do it differently every time. Here you can see we're using the Morning Glories. And just to add a little extra kicker on this, I glued the Enroute paper over the entire thing, just to give it that little veil of softness. I like that look, and it certainly has a lot of appeal to everybody. It gives a real tactile feel to have those little fibers over it. Ooh, now we're going to get into some hot peppers. I have way too much fun with the pepper theme. Here you can see we're still working with the 3 corners, only here I linked these 2 corners in this one. But if you think about it, we still have the 3 sides coming in with the zig and the zag, trying to repeat some of the whites in the background to give a nice glow. And this one I just decided to give it an extremely strong warm dominance. Here's another one with the warm dominance, again with the 3 sides, a little narrow, the whole end, and the 3rd corner. And for the last one, I did some raspberries. Kind of fun with the soft, cool background. But the whole idea with these backgrounds is to work with the idea of when you have something light, you pop something dark behind it. And then when you have something dark, you pop something light behind it. So we'll be working with that transposition of dark against light, light against dark, when we get to the point where we're ready to do the background. We're also going to work with the concept of all these out of focus things. This is really fun to do. There's just the right time before it starts to completely dry, but it's still got a certain degree of wetness there. That's when you want to come in and start painting things in the background. And you do this all a la prima style. You don't actually draw that in, you just wing it. You just do it. And you can see as the background continues to dry more, they become more and more in focus. So it gives you a lot of variation from very wet to a little bit drier to very dry. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to start with sunflowers. Now, sunflowers are one of my favorite subjects. Here you can see I've got a couple references. This is from an actual field, and I like this because you're getting the scale. Thinking in terms of perspective, you've got the flowers that are back are smaller, the flowers in the foreground are larger, but this has such great information because it is a still life, and I was able to get up close. But this gives me some ideas about how to paint the center, some details about the overlapping petals. And one of the things I want to try to capture is this idea that when the sun is touching the petals closest to us, they're going to be brighter yellows and golds. But then as we move around the flower and we go into the shadow areas, these are going to become much darker value. So we're going to start with the golds, probably going into some oranges and going into some quinacridone burnt orange even. This is the actual demonstration, the completed demonstration that I'm going to be doing for you. And the reason you're seeing this is I just remembered when I was all done that I didn't tell you an extremely important piece of information. And that is when you work on this project, it's very important that you use Arches paper. I used Arches 140, which is my favorite paper, and it's the extra bright white. But it can be Arches 300, whatever. It has to be Arches. The reason being that any other paper, Kilimanjaro, Winsor Newton, Wattman, Lana Corral, many of those papers have a very soft surface. So when you put down the color and then mask over it, what happens is the masking actually reactivates the color. When you take off the masking, you're taking the color off with it. Whereas Arches, once this color dries into the Arches paper and you re-wet it, it doesn't reactivate the color. So you're much safer and you have very little chance of losing the color if you do it. Another thing I want you to take special precaution, always check your watermark and read the watermark where it says Arches France. That's the front of the paper. The front surface of the paper is a smoother surface. It has a little more sizing to it. Even though the paper is internally sized, they always put a little extra sizing on that front part. And with less bumps, more sizing, your colors flow so much better. So now, loaded with that piece of information, we'll get started with the demonstration. So let's talk a little bit about the composition. Now, I'm working with a half sheet, and I decided to have my star of the show up here. And I put a lot of petals, some in front of the center, some in the middle, and then the ones in the back here. These are the ones that are the green colored ones, kind of a yellowy green. And those have these long, pointy shapes. So that's kind of fun. We've got layer of petals. And then down here I have some petals big, some petals small, a petal overlapping a petal. So I tried really hard to get a lot of variety. And now that I look at it and evaluate the composition, it's pretty much a strong triangle. And what I tried to do is kind of I picked this flower here because I like the way you could see the back of it, and I like the yellow-green. And then I kind of was looking at, I don't know, wasn't this one, but one similar to this, where it's pointing in this direction. And see these little guys here. As the sunflower matures, it starts out here on the edges, and as the seeds mature, they move towards the center. So you can actually see this interesting shape in these little dots here. Here they're on the outside, here they're closer to the center. So I actually did that in my centers. I took and drew in some of these little circles going around, and then when I was getting ready to paint the center, I actually took some masking. I like to use the Incredible White Mask, which is a clear mask, and I'm using now a crochet hook, and I'll show you this technique a little later, but I just dipped into the masking with my crochet hook, and I actually masked these petals that are over the center of my sunflowers. So I masked these petals right here, and I masked these petals right here. So I'm actually ready. In a very short time, I'm going to start putting the color down on the centers. But let's look a little bit more at the composition. These are very much the same distance away. Good grief, I gotta do something about this. So I think what I'll do is I'm gonna add another petal, another leaf shape. I'm gonna overlap it here. And that will take our eye off the edge. And if you'll notice, whenever I have a stem, I almost always have petals in front of it, petals overlapping. One thing you don't want to do with sunflowers is have a stem going right out the bottom of the page. Just don't let it happen. Always put some kind of a leaf or a petal in front of it. Here I even put a petal in front of the flower. And I have another petal reaching up, interlocking with this flower, and then two petals reaching up and touching the edge of the paper. So I really think all this movement and connection and overlapping, the directional movement going this way and this way, all very important to give a real energy to your painting. So let's get started with the actual painting. One of the things I like to do is I like to create an interesting center. And I'm just going to steal this picture back momentarily. And for example, we'll look at this flower right here. This lovely texture you see in the center here where you get the feeling of the light touching here going into the dark behind the petals. I actually did this. I got a little trick to do that. And I did it with this gauze. This is actually a medical gauze. So I'm going to take the gauze, just a little section of it, and I'm going to open it up until I'm down to a single layer. So this is really the hardest thing you have to do in the whole lesson, is opening up this gauze. And you'll see there's going to be a little kit inside your DVD or video, and it will have a little piece of this gauze in there for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this gauze to fit the center of the flower. So I'm just going to reach over here and hope my scissors will work. I don't know what happens to my scissors, but they don't cut very well. Hey, they did the job, so I shouldn't be complaining. Okay, now right now I just have a dry piece of gauze here, cut approximately to the shape I want. I'm going right over the top of the area where I did the masking. Now I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to wet this gauze so it will stay in place. Don't open it up, don't do anything to it. Just put it straight on there, and whatever you do, don't wet outside the center. The color will only go where it's wet. So we're going to push all those little ends in and get this thing wet. Move it out to fit. There. Now we're ready. Now comes the real excitement. I'm going to take my colors, and I'm going to start with my brightest color. This happens to be my Winsor Yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Winsor Yellow right here on the edge, facing the sunlight. I'm not painting the whole thing yellow, I'm just putting the yellow on that very edge. And then I'm going to go into my quinacridone gold. So what I do is I go from my water to my paint, then I activate it on the palette to be sure I've got exactly what I want, a nice rich mixture. Now I'm going to put this mixture next. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my brush really flat and just do the outer edge of the gauze. Now I'm going to wash my brush out, give it a good shake, and I'm going to move into my Scarlet Lake, really intense orangey color. That's going to be my next color that I'm going to put on here. Now the next color is going to be quinacridone burnt orange. Absolutely beautiful color. It's the one that I'm now using as a substitute for burnt sienna. So I'm going to put this color all the way into and behind those petals that I had masked to protect them. So now we have Winsor Yellow, Quin Gold, Scarlet Lake, and quinacridone burnt orange. Now if I really want this to have even more intensity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into alizarin crimson. This is a beautiful, beautiful pinky red, and I'm going to put that right here on top of my quinacridone burnt orange. A little bit on top of the Scarlet Lake too, just a little. Now in order to make that dark, I actually have to go to the complement. So I'm going to go over here to my Antwerp Blue. So you can see all the colors out here, right around the palette. And this is the complement. The one, I have all the cool colors on one side, all the warm colors on the other. Now I've put all the warm colors down, now I'm going to go over here to the cool side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right in the darkest dark on my shadow here. Just poke it in there. So now we should have a nice feeling of the light going to dark. I've also found out that if I add just a little bit of salt in that ring where those little white shapes are, sometimes I'll get a little added effect. It'll look like those seeds that are maturing. So I'm now going to turn the camera off, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the center on this, and then we'll come back and talk about painting the petals. Well, this is always the exciting part. Lifting the gauze to see, ooh, oh, I got a good one. Terrific. Now you could actually use this again if you had similar shapes, but we're just going to take now, and remember I said I had to mask these to protect them, so now I'm going to pull off the masking, and now, oh nice, we've got that lovely petals breaking over the background. And now we're going to see what we got here for these circles. Hey, that worked out pretty good too. And over here we have a smaller one. Yep, I'm very pleased with these. You never know, it's definitely a potluck arrangement. Sometimes they work and sometimes they work better. They always work, but sometimes they work a little better. Now if you were interested in realism, you can see how it's a deeper pocket in there. I could actually go in and tone that just a little bit deeper, but I don't usually get too excited about that. I kind of like to work in a semi-abstract style. But I do feel it's nice to tone these little rascals a bit. So just using somewhere between my gold and my yellow, I will come in and just dab a little color on them, just so they're not so stark white. Especially since the ones under here are going to be in a bit of a shadow. So we'll give all those a little toning. Well, now it's time to think about the way the color is affected by the light. This is from an outdoor patch of sunflowers, and it's actually a very poor reproduction, but at the same time, it does give you the effect that when the light is touching it, you're going to have a much lighter color, like the Windsor yellow, Aurelian yellow. And then as you move around, you can move more into the oranges. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to think about all these harmonic colors. I'm going to switch to a small round brush. And up here I'm going to think about, okay, this is in the full sun. So I'm going to start with painting it dry, because on dry paper I'll be able to be in control, and I'll be able to leave some of these little white shapes, the actual white of the paper. So here we have the sun coming down, a few little white shapes, and then I'm going to move into my quinacridone gold. Clean that up a bit. We want a nice fresh one. Ooh, there we go. And as I move in closer, and in the shadow part here, as we move in closer to the sunflower itself, you can see now we've got the white of the paper, the yellow, and the gold. Let's do another one. We'll start over here. We're going to have some white of the paper, just little slivers of white. And then on the underside here, we're going to go into the gold. So where the yellow, I should say, and the gold meet, it actually looks like a wetted to wet. The colors are charging into each other. And then up here, we're going to be mostly into the yellow and the white, because these are the very lightest ones. So I'm not going to put much color on these except the most primary yellow that I have. Maybe a little touch of gold as I get back here, but not much more than that. Mostly my Windsor yellow and the white of the paper. Little Windsor yellow and the white of the paper. Now as we start going around, ooh, this is the fun part. Now I'm starting with my yellow. I'm going to go into my gold about halfway. Only now I'm going to move into some Windsor orange. So always get your color activated on the palette, and then on the underside, which is the shadow side here, I'm going to put a little bit of the orange. So see, we're thinking the sun penetrating like this. Let's do it again. And you notice how I'm skipping a few so they don't touch each other. Now we have the white of the paper, the yellow. We're going to go into the gold. And then we're going to go into the orange on the underside. That's exciting. Now we're getting into the most deepest shadowed area. So now I'm going to skip the yellow. I'm going to go starting with the gold. So right about here I'm going to start the top of the petal with the gold. Don't really care if I skip any whites now. Then I'm going to go into the gold, or the orange, Windsor orange. Maybe a few little whites, they're addictive. Then I'm going to go into my quinacridone burnt orange. And the burnt orange is going to go on the very deepest shadow side. Let's do that again. Start with the gold. And that gold is really a dark value. Then we're going to go into Windsor orange. And then we're going to go into the quinacridone burnt orange. So you can see already we're getting the feeling of the sunlight going into the midtones, going into the darker tones. And that's how I would continue all these petals. I'd paint on dry paper, think about my sun side and my shadow side. The only other thing I want to think about is when you go into the back of these petals, and I think it's going to be hard to see on these references, but the petals that are in the very back are a yellow-green. So I'm going to do just a few yellow greens. I'm going to take a little bit of the gold, I'm going to take a little bit of Antwerp blue, and I'm going to make some of these petals especially these cute little ones with the real long shapes. Those are the ones that originally covered the bud before it opened. So some of these are going to be painted in a very yellowy green. See, now I'm adding a little more Windsor to it, more yellow green. So I'm going to vary it. Some are darker green, some a lighter green, but they're all going, these very back petals are going to be the yellow greens. So you can see that, I can just do that on dry paper because they're kind of flat. They're about 3 petals back. If I want to, if I want to work harmonically, what I would do is I make them a little bit darker where they're coming in to join the flower. That will give you always that little extra harmonic kick. That's nice. Okay, now it's going to be really fun. We're going to paint the stem of the sunflower. And to do this, I always say, okay, do I want it wet or do I want it dry? The answer is I want it to be painted wet so that I can get the full feeling of the light touching it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the stem with just my water. So I move it down. Do this little part too. Now, as you know, my sun's coming this side, so I'm going to start with my primary yellow, but I'm going to put the yellow on the shadow side, knowing it's going to roll around. That's what I want it to do. So I see I've saved a little margin of the white paper there. Now I'm going to take my Antwerp blue, same thing, I'm going to put this color on the shadow side. It's going to immediately turn into a green. And then when I wash my brush out and come back in again with that same color, Antwerp blue, this time it's going to stay on the edge. And see, now I'm getting the blue-green. I've only used 2 colors, but I've got white, yellow, green, and blue-green. All of this happening because I let it mix on the paper. Very important. And now I'm getting a nice little irregular shape. So I'm going to let this roll a little bit. I love that. Look at how nice. Got this nice irregular shape. But always when you paint a flower and then you just give it a green stem, it's way too green. One of the things that you'll hear me repeat over and over again throughout this whole lesson is the fact that whenever you paint a flower, you need to repeat the color of that flower in the stem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my quinacridone burnt orange. We'll activate that. Now remember, I always take my water, give it a good shake so that I'm not going into the paint with too much water. And then after I've activated it, I put it on, after I've grabbed it, I should say, I activate it on the top of my palette. So now I'm going to put some of this beautiful orange right on top of this. Just pick it up right on top. I love that glow you get with the pure color. Look at that, just coming right through. Oh, it's gorgeous. Now I'm going to take, and these little rascals are actually hairy, so I'm going to take my brush, turn it over, and I'm going to add just a few little funny little hairs coming out of this. Then I'll pick up a little of this color and put a few funny hairs on the white side. See, I can't pull this out on the white side because there's no color there. So I have to put the color there. And it's really funny. There isn't much to this, but it's got a really big appeal. People think you're a really good painter when you can do these little hairs. They think you did that with a little teeny brush. And for the final touch, these stems are actually kind of blotchy looking. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of salt, but only on the side where my light is. So there we have it. All that work just to make one stem, but it's going to be worth it. Wait till you see it. Now I want to talk a little bit about painting the leaves. The leaves are very much the same as the stem. I'm going to think about the sun side, I'm going to think about the shadow side, and I'm going to think about adding the color of the flower in it. And what I generally do is paint the leaves the first time wet. The second time I might come in and add some details when it's dry. So let's start by wetting the shape with just water. This is just a relatively small brush for what I'm doing, but I like it. It gives me a lot of control. So the first thing we're going to do is wet it. And you don't want to get it too wet. If you're using too big of a brush, sometimes what happens, it just plain old gets too wet and you don't have the control you need. So by wetting it and double checking all the edges a second time, now I'm going to come in with my Winsor yellow. And my sun's coming this way, so I'm going to start the Winsor yellow over here. And you can see there's different veins coming through. So I'm just going to put the Winsor yellow on the sun side, and then on the shadow side I'm going to use my gold. And this is going to immediately give me a darker value of green, just by using a different base of yellow. So Winsor yellow, quinacridone gold. Now I'm going to use the same color blue. This is my Antwerp blue. It's a great blue. It's got a lot of yellow in it, and it runs. I love it. It runs in water. So I'm kind of thinking about the veins here. See how I'm kind of playing a little bit? This I want to have the light. Now I'm just putting this pure green down again. Notice how it looks darker over here. It's because we're on a different yellow. And we might even tip it a little bit and let these colors run. Have a little party. Now I'm going to come in with my quinacridone burnt orange, and I'm going to touch that color in. It's actually a little bit wet. I need more color and less water. So I'm going to put that color down and let that blend. Pretty fun. And see, we've got little blushes of white, yellow, green. Sometimes what I'll do at the very end is I'll take a little of the Quin Gold and a little Antwerp blue, and I'll do a mixed green, which is a very dark green. So that's what I'm going to do now for my last death-defying act here. I'm going to come in with a little bit of this mixed green and put it in my deepest shadow areas. So we'll just let that sit and we'll see what happens. I'm also going to put just a little touch of salt, only where my lights are. Just a couple little, I could almost count the number of grains I'm adding here. So we're going to let that just sit and catch up a little bit. Now, once in a while you'll have a leaf that will show two sides of the leaf. I have a very small one over here. So you have your leaf in the back and then the curl of the leaf in the front. Whenever I'm doing that, I paint each side separately. So for example, if I were going to paint this little rascal, I'd wet it first. I'd drop in my yellow, drop in my blue, and I would always be thinking about how is that petal affected by this petal? And what I would probably do is keep the light here going to dark, and then I'd keep it light here going to dark. So whenever you have something light, think about putting something dark next to it, just to get that lovely transposition of color. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and paint some of these petals, and we'll give you a little music for now. So we're just going to let the camera go for a little while, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish it off camera. So I'm going to start up here again. I'm going to do some of my lighter yellows, going into my golds, and then I'll just work my way around the petals. as you can see, I've been having a lot of fun here. I just finished up all the bright colored petals and the darker petals. Mostly bright because this is a very new one just opening up. And then this one, which has the lighter yellows going into the darker tones and the green ones behind it. And I did finish up my leaves, trying to get a variety now, but always thinking about the light touching mid-tone dark, light mid-tone dark. And then on some of these, I wanted to show you how you can come in again and create some of the, what would you call them? I guess the vines, those little interesting shapes. Now, I don't have a leaf to show you, and I don't know if you can see on this photograph, but there are these interesting leaves, veins, excuse me, and they're almost always lighter, and then the part in between is darker, which is good. That's going to make it really easy. So I took a pencil and I drew in some of the lines, and then what I was going to do was just very quickly show you how you can come in and, leaving the lighter part, you can just negatively paint in a few of these shapes. And it does add a nice little touch of detail. Doesn't take very long. And then all those lovely colors under there just kind of pop out. Now I'm going to just wet my brush and lose this edge, because what I want is I want this to kind of fade into the light edge. So I'm going to put it a little bit darker there, then wet my brush and just let this edge melt out. So here too I'll come in and paint a few darker shapes here and there. You don't want to make these too perfect. That would be very boring. So you can see we've created a few veins. Now just by wetting this edge and letting it melt out into that nice light edge. We still have light, mid-tone, dark. And then if we want, we can go even darker over on this side. Let's say we come in, do it even a little bit darker on our dark side. Maybe even a little darker here. Again, I'm going to wet my brush, shake it out a bit, and just pull that so that we're getting the illusion dark to light, dark to light, dark to light. And see, I can do it over here too. Maybe on this one I'll just use the blue, which will obviously turn green when it goes over these transparent colors. So what I like to do is kind of start with the center, wet my brush, shake it out, take off some of the extra moisture, and then just come in here and lose the edge. Wet the brush, shake it out, lose the edge. Oops, can't wait too long. My edge is already starting to dry a bit. And that'll teach me. So we'll pull it out just a little bit further. But just so you get the idea, it does add a nice little touch. Lighten it up a bit here. See, I like the light against the dark. Now we'll lose these edges. So we've created a little bit of detail. We still haven't lost the nice feeling of light mid-tone. Okay, the other thing now, we are ready to move into the masking. This is the last thing you do before you start the background, which is what this is all about. The background is the best part. So generally at this point I do an overall, did I paint everything? Looks like it. And I don't do any fixing now. A lot of times I hear students saying, oh, well, this leaf is too light and this leaf is too dark. And I'll say, don't fix anything until you do the background wash. Then you can do the adjusting and the fixing. So generally at this stage, I will take my good Oops eraser. This is something new. And it's one of the only erasers that I know of that will actually erase pencil lines after you've wet the graphite. So because these are yellows are still very difficult to clean up afterwards. I often, before I start my masking, will just come in and clean it up a little bit because I'm always a little careless with my drawing. The only thing is you don't want to miss all these great, see how I've left this lovely light area here? The pencil line tells me where to go. Once I erase the pencil line, I might forget and fill in some of these. So don't forget, if you do this step, be sure to mask all those lovely whites that you carefully saved. Now we're ready to start the masking. And when I do the masking, I need to have a board. Okay, now we're ready to start the masking. You'll notice that I slipped a board underneath my paper now because in order to do the masking, one of the ways I like to mask requires a board to support the paper. So I'm going to first of all tell you about the mask. Masking, or misket, or frisket, there's a lot of names for this, is available in a clear, and it's also available in what's called the Incredible White Mask. That's the one I'm using, it's the one I prefer. And it's also available in pinks and yellows and gray, green, all different colors. Now if you put the masking that's been toned on top of here, then you can't actually see the colors. And when you're painting the background, you don't know what you're relating it to. So my preference is always to use this white masking. First of all, it goes on white, but it dries clear. So to me, this is perfect. And when you're working with masking, one thing you never want to do is shake it. Even if it says shake vigorously on the directions, never shake it, because what that does is it aerates this mixture, and then when you put it on, you get these little bubbles that break, and then those become little pieces of color later. So what I do is I gently stir the masking. You'll notice I'm using a crochet hook, and this is my latest trick. The crochet hook is great for stirring because it just involves wiping it off and there's no damage to it. The other thing is the crochet hook is a great way to add the masking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let gravity do some of the work for me. I'm going to elevate this, that's why I needed the board, and then I'm going to start here with the masking, and you'll see it's white. And it's the perfect consistency, and I'm going to let the gravity work for me. So it's working a little too fast here, I better hurry up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate where I want this. Let me back this up a little bit. I got to get it up to the top first. Really, this does work really good. Okay, now I'm ready. So now I'm going to put the masking on with the crochet hook and with gravity helping me. So you can see it wants to run downhill, so I simply kind of keep a bead on this and put lots on. Biggest problem people have is they don't put enough masking on, and then what happens is they have this disappointment later where they missed a spot or they missed several spots. And oh, it is a disappointment because you don't want color on top of any of this. So you can see it doesn't take very long. We're going to let this just roll down here. Now if you decide to try this crochet hook idea, I get it between a 3.5 and about a 5.5 size. I have no idea what that means. I don't crochet. And what I like about the crochet hook is I can go out into these little tips like on the petals here and get all this great detail. But if I want to, I can just load this up with lots of this and just move it across in a bead, as I was mentioning earlier. And I can just pull it down in and out of these little pointy shapes. See, this is good now. I want to leave that little shape in the middle there open, because that's going to pick up the background color. Now, another way you can do this is with a brush. And whenever I use a brush, then it's a little more preparation. You have to prepare the brush with some soap in it. So I'm just going to go a little bit further with this, especially now that we're on this dark area. You can really see how the white covers up the color, so you actually can see where you're going. And if you just load it up, even a big shape doesn't take that much time. The thing that most people forget is they forget that gravity. You need to have the gravity thing going. That little bit of weight pulling down like that keeps that bead moving down the paper. Now, one of the things I didn't mention, extremely important, I decided to do it while I was doing this, you must dry the paper really well. So what you didn't see off camera, I took a hair dryer and I literally ran it at high heat, front of the paper, back of the paper, and I was able to completely dry this. You don't want to have any moisture in here. If there's any moisture in the paper, when I'm adding this wet masking, it could be picking up that moisture, and later when you take the masking off, you could be losing the color. And that's what we don't want to happen. So there's a lot of different ways to protect yourself. One is to dry the paper first really well. The other is not to take the masking off until it's completely dry. And the other one I mentioned at the very beginning, which is to use Arches paper, because it's the only paper that will hold the color like this. Almost every other paper you will lose it. Okay, so you can see how easily that works. Let me show you how to do it with a brush. And with the brush, I would just use a small brush, never more than a size 6 round. And I even prefer the script brush, but I'm just going to use this one. It's a brush I've dedicated just to masking. I wet it first, shake out the extra water, and this is a bar of soap. And by soaping this up really well, and then with the soap in the brush, I dip it in, and I'll just come up here and finish this part up here. And see, with the brush, it's so much easier to brush it out so thin, and I see it happen all the time. People brush it out so thin, they miss big spots. So try to get it on thick enough. This is why I like the crochet hook. I always tease that people have learned to make things stretch, especially if their mother went through the Depression. So whether your mother went through the Depression or not, I want you to get this on good and thick so that it's actually forming a nice white color that is covering it up. Try not to go outside the lines. Now I can see where I've gone outside the lines a little bit. You know, it's kind of hard to talk and do something. So if you go outside the lines, I got a little trick to show you later how you can fix it. But I want you to be very careful, only to go exactly where the paint is. Okay, so when we come back, I'm going to have this entire piece masked, and we're going to get started with the background. Well, I have everything masked, and this is the good news. You can see what I've done because the masking has dried clear. And this is really the only way to do it in my book, because I'm actually looking at the actual color of the flower, and now when I punch in the darks, punch in the lights, I'm actually going to be working with the reality of what the final piece will look like. And sometimes people wait forever for this to dry. I just give you a little tip. As soon as it clears, it's ready to go. And it will always feel kind of sticky. So now I'm ready to think about where I want to do my darks and my lights. So this is what I call my little roadmap. My roadmap to success. Without this roadmap, once I start wetting the paper, I can't think about where I want my darks and where I want my lights. So this helps me go through the process in my head and then transferring it to this little paper, and it makes such a big difference. Sometimes I'll do this without this roadmap, and every time it's been a disaster. So I've learned the hard way. This is really important. And what I need to know is, where do I want my darks? This I want to be dark. So there's a dark. And actually it would be nice to come over here. This has got a big light end on it. So I could come over here. And see, there's a lot of lights in here. So I could actually come down and form a dark along here. And I would like to have some dark coming in because the end of this is so light. So I think I'm just going to kind of zig down here with some dark. And this would look good with a dark. So, kind of straight across, but let's just see what happens here. And this would look good dark. So now we've got this kind of circular thing going. Well, so far that's looking pretty silly. So I'm going to now make it into some kind of a nice pattern of darks. This dark pattern could go up here, touch the edge of the paper, swing down, and actually come through down here, down to that, and then I think I'll just go right off the page here. So kind of a dark that zigs and zags. Maybe I'll zig it a little bit more here, make it a little wider here, give it a little turn. And let's see, it's kind of a strange looking pattern, but you know what? It's going to help me a lot. So now I know where my dark patterns need to be. That means all of these can be fairly light. And I'm ready to wet my paper and go. Now in terms of the color, oh boy, what colors do I want to use? So I did bring in a few pictures here to look at. Here's a picture that I did using a French ultramarine in the background. And the French ultramarine makes a very nice background. You can see it's got a dark value, looks like the blue sky. And then I've repeated some of these colors to suggest some sunflowers out of focus in the background. And then this is the one I had such a good time with later. I just decided to take a pencil and start drawing on it. Another one I have here is the one I did in the pub over in Ireland. And it was dark in there, and boy, I really punched the darks in here. And I'm kind of intrigued by this. On this one I used actually a pink, which happens to be permanent rose. And then I also used French ultramarine. But the mixture of the French ultramarine with the pink gave me purple. And purple is the complement of yellow, and that's always a good idea. Working with harmonic colors when you're developing your subject, but working with complementary colors when you're thinking about getting real emphasis. So, you know what? I'm going to do the complement. I'm going to go with the purples. First thing I'm going to do is wet the paper. And because this is masked, and I don't want the backing to get wet, remember what I said now, it's a combination of Arches paper and the fact that this was very dry before I put the masking on. Now I certainly don't want to wet the back of the paper and then take a chance on losing that color. So I'm only going to wet the front of the paper. So I've got my big 3-inch hockey brush, and I'm going to get this entirely wet, really wet. So up and down, make sure you don't miss any spots. Up and down. And then I'm going to go back and forth. That way I shouldn't miss anything. And then because I'm going to be tipping and turning this, I'm going to use some clips. And this will help me keep it together. So I'm going to put a clip here and a clip over here. And I don't put the clips on very deep, just come in a little bit. And now we're going to be ready to go. I'm going to switch to my 1.5 inch brush. And one of the first things I want to do is I want to give the illusion that there's actually some of these sunflowers in the background. So I'm going to go into my Winsor yellow, and I'm just going to suggest what might look like a sunflower in the background here. Maybe I'll do another one back here. That's kind of fun. And maybe, no, that's going to be dark. I don't know, maybe I'll just suggest another one over here. So that's just my Winsor yellow. Then I'm going to go into a little quinacridone gold. Now remember, this is a really powerful yellow. It goes quite deep. So I'm going to use that to suggest, again, almost like petals. And now the next thing I'm going to do is go into a little bit of this yellow, and I can put it in any of these areas. And so I'm going to just come in with a little yellow, just to bounce a little background light here. I'm going to come in maybe over here too. See, that's a light area. I could do it down here, kill my white corner. I think that, now maybe just a touch over here. So that certainly has brightened things up. Now I'm actually going to think about my pattern of dark. So I'm going to go into my permanent rose, clean off my palette here, so we're getting a nice, fresh, clean start. And I'm going to activate the color here and then activate it on my palette. I want a nice, rich, fresh color. And so I'm coming in with this pink. See where I designed my pattern? Wherever I wanted the darks, that's where it's going to go. Now I really want to punch this out. I want to come down and punch this out. Then I'm going to move across here and go off the edge of the paper. Come in down here. Top here is very light. Then I was thinking of moving across here. This looks a little strange in the pink, but remember, this is the component to make purple. So we're just getting a good start now. And then I want to go off the edge of the paper here. Ooh, this is fun. I dream about this at night. I actually paint these in my sleep, I swear. Okay, now I want to come and zigzag down here off the bottom. Wow. And see, there's still some little whites here and there. If I'm lucky, I might be able to save a few of those. We'll see. Okay, now I'm ready to come in with my French ultramarine. And French ultramarine doesn't like to blend really well. It likes to stay the color it is. It's got a strong integrity here. So we're just going to see what happens. This is my color that has very deep value. So first I'm going to get it wet here and always activate it on your palette. And then I'm going to punch it in here. Ooh, fun. And back here. See, we don't worry about those little spots. They're just going to move around. So we should see this turning kind of purple pretty soon. This looks like it's trying to dry. So my trusty friend, my sprayer, see it has the narrow inner, gives me a fine mist. I'm going to keep this wet. Some of the edges where I haven't been painting could possibly be starting to dry. So with my hand always moving, I'm going to keep the painting wet. You can't wet the painting with the sprayer, but you can keep it wet with the sprayer, and that's what we're trying to do. Okay, now I'm still looking at my roadmap, and I'm looking at my picture. I'm trying to decide what's happening here. And punch this out. Let's come down here. Okay, now because this is such a strong vertical shape, I want to create some horizontal movement. So I'm going to have a tissue handy. And see what happens when that goes into the yellow. It gets a little bit muddy. We can't really help that. We'll just get over it. A little gray is good. Ooh, this is pretty active. Pretty wet. So we're just going to let the colors kind of go back and forth. Like I say, it's going to have a mind of its own. And this is what I call the ugly stage. It always looks bad. Just relax. It'll get better. I actually kind of like some of those grays. Now, sometimes I'll pick up a little bit of that extra. Let's let it roll back this way. Pick up a little extra. Let's let it roll this way. Again, I'll pick up a little bit of that rolls off. Because we have so much masking, it's getting trapped. So you'll notice I use my finger quite a bit to move it around. So now I'm just going to let it kind of equalize this way and that way. Oh, such fun. Now you can see there's going to be a lot of granulation. This is what happens when you work with this color combination. The French ultramarine likes to do that granulation. So now I'm actually going to take some of this pink and some of this blue and mix it. So I don't do a mixed color until later. And I'm going to punch in just a little bit more dark here and there, wherever I think it needs it. I don't want to lose the glow. See, I like that look where you get the glow of the pink. Ooh, that like that. That's good. So we don't want to lose that. But sometimes I'll just come in and punch in a little extra. Now we're at the stage that I call rock the baby. We're going to have to get this to settle down a bit. Because right now what we have are big pockets of wet. So what I do is I do a little bit of this rocking motion. And when I see that it's kind of caught in between, I'll push it with my finger and then rock the baby. And when I'm doing this rock the baby motion, I don't tip it very far. I just tip it a little bit until it starts to settle down. And this could go on for a little while. So I'm going to turn off the camera while I rock the baby. And then we'll tell you how much time I spent on this. Well, this has only been 3 minutes. And I've just been doing this gentle rocking. And you can see now it's much more stable. When I tilt it, the colors aren't running anymore. But at the same time, it's still wet. And that's what we want. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up some very rich color. Here's some French ultramarine. That's the color I used in that wash. And I'm going to take that color and mix it with some gold and make a dark green. And now is when I get to have some fun. I'm going to come in and put in some little out of focus petals. Yes. And see, they're going to stay soft like that. I'm using my round brush, and I'm holding it in an upright position, so when I press down it gets wide, when I release it gets narrow. We're just going to put in some of these background colors in this dark greenish gray color. So that's fun. And then, but the trick is to keep this mixture very rich. Not much water. I can't add water to something like this or I'll get in a lot of trouble. But I can add a rich mixture like this. The other thing I can do is I could come in and add like some leaf shapes. These are leaf shapes in the background. I can also just have some fun. Why do things have to be straight up and down? We can have a leaf shape coming off here. I could have something twirling around. What the heck? Gotta have a good time with this. And then I'm going to add maybe another leaf shape back here, kind of a shadowy one. They're kind of long and pointed, and then they're also kind of heart-shaped. See, like that, kind of a heart shape. Maybe a few more of these petals coming out. And then for my last death-defying act, I'm going to take and do another mixture. I'm adding just a little more French ultramarine to this mixture. And I'm just going to, like I say, have a little fun with some crazy lines. Don't know why, but I just feel like doing this. A lot of them are just going to fade away. So it's not even something to get too concerned about. Notice how I'm staying out of these nice pristine areas, though I don't want to be adding some curly cues up there because I don't feel it's going to add anything. It's time to get these off. You can see I already waited too long. They create bleed backs. So I'm going to get rid of those clips right now. And you'll notice I'm working on a board. If I were working on a piece of plastic, I would also be lifting this up and getting rid of any moisture along the edge, because that moisture likes to bleed back in from the edges. And this, I've got a little bleed back starting here. Now if I protect this side and spray into this side, I can kind of reactivate that. What I have to do is be sure my finger is clean, give it a few minutes for this dry side to start getting wet. Then I'm just going to soften that edge a little bit with my finger. Just let it melt out a little bit. Let's see what that, I think that'll be a little bit less noticeable. But I think I've done enough, and actually I'm quite pleased. I like the glow of the yellow, the suggestion of the background. I like some of these glows of the pure pink coming through. And then my design, my dark pattern coming through has really popped everything out. So now it's just a matter of letting it rest, and you'll see it after it dries. It's going to dry about 15 to 20% lighter. So you have to prepare yourself for that. Okay, we are now in a position to take all this off, and I did exactly what everybody else did. I started pulling it off, and then I remembered, no, wait a minute, Karlyn. First thing you have to do is ask yourself, before you take all the masking off, you have to ask yourself, is there anything else I want to do? And because everything is protected right now, see, I could mix up a really dark color like that one I used here, and I could go ahead and paint all kinds of things in the background. So really, I think I am going to do that. If you'll remember, I used the Quin Gold and my French Ultramarine Blue, which gives me this really dark gray tone. And see how these are just fuzzy at this point. But if I wanted to, I could come in and make some very crisp air things. And because everything's protected, I can just simply come in here and add these. So it's kind of a nice thing to do. And I'm going to do more of this on my next lesson. But I just wanted to show you that this is definitely an option. If you feel maybe you were afraid to do some of this fun out of focus stuff, then do it now in control. Get out your photograph, look at the shapes of the leaves, and just paint a few of these shadowy leaves. It's actually a pretty neat thing. So with just a few of these added, that'll be enough. Now it is time to take off the masking. And this is something you don't want to hurry. you have to remember now, this is the next day. I'm actually pulling this off the day after I did it. And that's important, that it's very, very dry. If you take it off before it's totally dry, you're risking losing the color. And see, I'm not losing any of the color. This is very exciting. Now they say you shouldn't take it off with your finger because you're adding oils. But I don't put anything on my fingers, so I guess I'm just going to take a chance. And see, if you've put it on there good and thick, look at how nice. It comes off all in one fell swoop. And now you'll be able to see the excitement of the color. Look at the sparkly color we've got. Oh man, that's, yeah. And so I'm going to pull the rest of this off camera, but let's do a quick evaluation here. We have some lovely glowing colors from the yellows and the pinks and the blues. I did manage to get a few very grayed down colors. See, this color is what happens when the yellow, pink, and blue all mix together. You get this very grayed down color. But I'm just going to have to live with that. Sometimes that happens. And I do like what happened with the out of focus, and I do like the glow of the lights against the darks. Wow, that was fun. Now, one of the things that, to be totally finished with this, there's one more little thing I need to tell you about. And this involves the use of a little brush. This is simply an oil painter's brush. It's a very small one. And I took a scissors and cut this right in half. So this would be like an oil painter's brush that I've used for years and years, and it's worn down. And what I want to do with this brush is I want to soften some of these edges where there's little white shapes where I happen to over mask. And this is very easy to do. You're going to have, depending on your expertise putting on the masking, you are going to have some of this over masking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Becky move in close, and we're going to look at how to correct some of this. So I'm going to work right in this area. And one of the things you see here, for example, is where I over masked a little bit. And so now we have that little white shape. Now one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to mess up this beautiful graded wash back here. So the ideal way to soften this would be to turn the paper, and I dampened this with water, and I'm taking off a little of the extra. It's much better to take this color and push it into that area. How easy is that? So I'll take a little bit of this color and just simply push it into that white. And so just in a very short time, I can take these little white shapes and they're gone. And the sooner you do this, the better, because see, the paint is still kind of soft and it's easily activated. Of course, another way you could do this would be to simply mix a color similar to that and apply it. But why do that when you can just simply take your paintbrush, the stiff brush. These are also available from Cheap Joe's. They're called the Fritchie Scrubs. They're only about $2. And if you were in a class with me, I'd give you one of these free. But there's like that little white shape, one little stroke or two here, gone. So this is what I would do. This would be my last death-defying act now, and this will be a finished painting. I just have to sign it. And what I would do is take and go around and clean up all these edges. Only takes a minute. But let me warn you again, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to come in from the side of the graded wash, because once you mess up this beautiful graded wash, you can't fix it. It's always better to go from, for example, from the stem into that color. Much better. That is in fact the only way to do it. From the stem out. So I just keep turning my painting around, so I'm always approaching from this direction. Now another thing we should talk about very quickly is signing your painting. There's a lot of ways to sign a painting. One way is to simply sign it with a pencil. Graphite is archival, it's acceptable in the, when you do a watercolor, your pencil lines, don't make it a mixed media. Your pencil lines, keep it as a watercolor. But if you were to take a pen and sign your painting, you've just changed that painting into a mixed media. So I don't advise signing with a pen. I either advise using a pencil, and then if you wet the pencil after you sign it, it's very difficult for somebody to erase it and put their own name on there. The other thing I like to do is just to take a small little round brush, like a little number 1 or number 2, and say using that same dark green, which goes with the painting, I could simply take and mix up a nice dark green. And what I like to do is I like to sign my name the same way I would sign it on a check. And I like to make the color look like part of the picture. Actually, signing a painting kind of ruins it, but you gotta do it. So I'm just gonna sign my name. I don't like to get too cutesy at an angle or anything like that. I just sign my name, pretty straightforward, and we're done. Now we're ready to start another entire lesson. And this one's going to be like laying down in a ditch somewhere. Although I've cheated a little bit, I do have some domestic poppies in here. And I'm probably going to add some weeds and things too at some point. But right now I'm just trying to do a composition that deals with an assortment of flowers. So what I did is what I usually do, and that is I'll just take a whole bunch of photographs that I like of the subject. I don't worry about whether the light's on them properly because I'll just make that part up. But I did like this particular poppy, and one of the things I like is the way this is flowing out. So I kind of drew that one with this down close to the bottom. So this is going to be one of my breakouts. Then I especially liked this flower here. So I thought, okay, I'll just change the direction of the stem because I want it coming into the composition. So I changed it just a little and I added that flower there. And then I grabbed another one here and decided to put that way up on top. And this is going to be my another breakout. So this is a breakout, and as you can see, I've already drawn the line here. Cheated just a little bit, but I had to get that line in. Because what I'm doing is the stem from this flower actually goes off the bottom of the page with some of the foliage interlocking with it. But then see how all the stems from the other flowers are lined up on this line, that arbitrary line that I drew. So now it's time for me to think about how do I want to make these other breakouts happen. And it looks like I'm going to end up with 4 of them. Now some people like to do a little thumbnail sketch and kind of figure out where their breakouts are going to be before they even start. I generally like to just start drawing and then I decide where I want the breakouts. So I think I'm going to start over here, and as it turns out, see, I've got a lot of these, everything kind of lined up here. So I'm going to have to come out just a little bit. And I've got a quilter's ruler here, which is awfully nice. It gives me this opportunity to line it up and get a nice straight edge. So one of the things I'm looking for is I don't want to form a tangent. Now if I were to end this exactly where that stem meets the flower, that would be a tangent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in just a little bit closer to the edge. Line it up, line up my little quilter ruler here to give us a nice clean edge. See, all this is inside now. That's good. So we'll bring this down. And don't draw this line through the flower. Go on the other side. Bring that up. Ooh, it just feels so good once you get to this point. I love it. So now you can see this is actually breaking out. We have a narrow edge here, a little wider here, and I think I'm going to go for quite wide up here. Now I tried to make all the sides different. Some people like to have them all the same. I actually like to have them all different. So over here now, again, that would be a bad tangent where it would line up with that petal. So it could go anywhere in here. This wouldn't be very good because that would be another tangent. Coming in would be okay. I think I'm going to actually go for that. Right there, I'm going to line up my edges here. And I'm going to get out my eraser and clean this up right away. There. Ooh, looks so much better. And then you have to remember when you're working with a half sheet, and I do have the full half sheet here, I am going to lose approximately an inch. So I'm actually imagining quite a bit of this upper space here is already going to be lost under the mat if I put it in a traditional half sheet mat. Now where to break here? I could just contain it and have just the tip coming out, seeing as I have a kind of major breakout over here. Or I could come in, do kind of a 1/3, 2/3. I think I'm going to do that. Kind of a 1/3, 2/3 arrangement here. Line it up again with my ruler. Oops. So we now have our breakouts, and this is really the simplest way to do a breakout. Just design what looks good with your particular, the flowers that are close to the edge. And then, like I say, I try to make these all a little different. And another very important thing that you want to have happen, you want to have areas where you have rest, where nothing is here. And see this, because I'm working on a smaller format, half sheet, I usually do this with a full sheet, I have crowded it a bit, but I still have left some nice open spaces, and that's where we're going to play later. So I have my star of the show. I've got my little backup chorus here, kind of zigging and zagging its way through. And then I decided to add some little buds in here too. This is the bud for this one, this is the bud for this one, and this is the bud for this one. And then I've interlocked a few of the foliage from the poppy. You can see here I've got a little foliage from the poppy, and I think I will add just a little bit more so it comes out to the edge here. I always like things to kind of touch. You can see I've also added a little bit of foliage from the coneflower down here. And I will be adding foliage from the coneflower up behind this later. So we're actually ready to start thinking about actually painting the subject. I'm going to start with the poppies. The poppies are so fun. And I was thinking, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a red poppy or a pink poppy? And I decided a red poppy, because most people like red poppies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking my brush and shaking out just a little bit of the water and coming in here and wetting one petal at a time. We have the paper everything's dry except the area that I'm wetting. And I always ask my students when I have a class, there are two ways to paint a flower. And usually after I get a whole litany of positive and negative and warm and cool and so on, somebody usually comes up with the right answer, which is you can paint a flower on wet paper or you can paint a flower on dry paper. And in this particular case, the poppy works really good painted on a wet surface. So if I just do one petal at a time, I can actually show the feeling of the light. See, when the light is touching the subject in a photograph, you actually see the white of the paper, or you see the yellow going into an orange going into a deep red. So this is what I'm trying to create right now, is this great feeling of light, mid-tone, dark within each one of these petals. Thinking about my sun source coming over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposely choose colors that I know are not going to move a great deal in water. So this happens to be my Aurelian yellow. And one of the interesting things about poppies is they do have kind of these accordion pleats. Now, if you draw those in, that's not a good idea, because this wet into wet paint isn't going to follow those lines you made. So all I do is a simple contour line, and right now I'm just putting the yellow here because that's where the light is touching it. Now the next color I'm going to choose is going to be my Scarlet Lake. And this color also moves very little in water. So look at this, I can design it to pick up like some of these shapes. Here we have the light, and then some of these accordion looking pleats, let's call them. So I'm going to do that. Some thin, some thick, some touching the edge. And then over here I'll go all the way out to the edge. So I'm trying to get a lot of nice variety here. And notice I put the yellow where I want the yellow, I put the orange where I want the orange. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get out some permanent rose. This is another one of those colors that doesn't move very much in water. So look at that. Now when I put the permanent rose down here and bring it up and touch it into that orangey color, we're going to have three very distinct things happening. We're going to have this pinky color, the orange color, and the yellow color. Now I can go even darker by going into my alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is the darkest red that I have on my palette. And see, I can put that color way in those deep crevices here. Now alizarin crimson does move in water, but because these other colors went down first, it doesn't move all that much. So it's pretty cool. I can just get this really nice dark color. Now I'm going to tip my paper and let them run a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint another one, another petal. I'm going to start down here, and I want to point out, when I go in to get my water, you'll notice I have this 3 wells here, and they're very shallow. When I go in, my brush only goes up to about here, never goes up over the top of the ferrule. So I don't have to worry about when I tip the brush it's going to drip. So I get my water, I shake it out, then I go to my color, in this case my, oops, wrong one, my Aurelian yellow. But first of all I have to go back and wet this. I'm going to back up a bit here. So first of all I'm going to wet the petal again. And I'm going to do the one that's breaking out. This is exciting. This is a showy one. So I'm going to try to make this part down here a color, because it's always going to be next to the white. So I'll start with my yellow and come in from this side with some of the yellow. Then I'm going to come in with my Scarlet Lake all the way from the edge. Some of the yellow will be showing through here. And then down here we're getting into more of the shadow side. So I think I'll just stick with the orange pretty much. Isn't that a miracle how it doesn't move much? I mean, this petal is soaking wet. So once you get to know which colors move in water and which don't, oh, that's just such a wonderful thing. Now I'm in my permanent rose, and we're just going to put that color down along this edge. And if you'll remember, I went from that color into my alizarin crimson. very, very rich, dark red. Red's a primary color, so the only way you can get red is to buy it. I don't buy many greens or I don't buy many purples because I can mix those, but you can't mix red, yellow, and blue. So my palette is basically a primary palette. Now I often will take and tip this a bit too, to encourage the colors to do a little blending. Okay, very nice. So at this point we're going to let the camera keep running, and I'm going to simply go ahead and paint all these, and we're going to speed it up. Now one of the things you have to think about as you progress, as you can see now I've got a few petals completed. Now as I start painting on this, I'm going to think about, okay, if it's dark, then I'm going to make it the next petal light, or if it's light on an area, I'm probably going to make the next petal dark. So at this point I don't even look at a photograph, I pretty much look at my painting and let it speak to me. So you can see it's quite dark in here, and what we have here is a petal coming out. So I'm going to start with my Aeolian yellow up here along this edge, and I'm purposely going to make this lighter because it's dark here. But now look what's happening here. I got yellow against yellow. Can't do that. So now I'm going to go into my Scarlet Lake, and I probably will make this area the Scarlet Lake. And see, even that is lighter than the color next to it. And of course we got a few of these pleat looking things coming down. And out here, I might start with my Scarlet Lake, but I think I'll go back now to my yellow and put some yellow in here too. Out here where it's capturing the edge. So I'll put my Aeolian here. Now it's dark here, so I'm going to keep it a little bit on the light side here. Then I'll go into my Scarlet Lake again. Last but not least, my Permanent Rose. And we'll move that along the bottom edge. And of course I'm still going to go into my alizarin crimson, this really beautiful dark red. So that'll go right along the edge here. And I'm going to tip it a little bit and let these colors move. Sometimes if you don't like these feathery edges, you can take and wet your brush and take off the extra moisture. You can actually lift in here and soften these a bit. I actually kind of like them feathery. But it is something you can do. If you want to change it, you can just lift in there with your brush and just soften it up a bit. Now another thing I wanted to talk about was getting those really strong dark centers. Ooh, those are great. And I don't have black on my palette, so I have a very simple formula for doing that. What I do is I use my alizarin crimson, and then I go over here to the complement, and I do a puddle of alizarin, and then I do a puddle of my phthalo green, which is also Windsor green. And with these two, with this puddle of the green and the red, those are complements, complements always give you darks. So just by pulling those two colors together, we now have black. So see, I can come in here and start painting these little fuzzy, what I love to call sex organs, but probably be nicer to call them pistils and stamens. And then the center has this interesting little spiral shape. And the base of it is green, so I'm not going to worry about that green. That's something I'll paint in later. But right now I'm going to kind of suggest that spiral shape going in there. And using my little script brush. This is just a great brush, about a number 3. It's not a round brush. It's similar to a rigger, only it's not quite as long. The actual name for it is a script brush. So that's what I usually use when I'm getting into detail like this. So there we are. We're almost ready to be finished with this flower. That didn't take very long. And of course these are just going to kind of come out throughout this area and form a nice dark. Another thing I can't wait to show you is the stem. So I'm going to do it at this time. I'm going to take just a small round brush, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the stem with just water. So as we're moving down, I'll reach in, get a little more water. And I'm always thinking about my sun side. So my sun is coming from this side. That means I'm going to take my yellow, pure yellow, and I'm going to put it on what would be the shadow side, knowing that it's going to roll over to the sun side. And what I'm hoping is that I will save just a little bit of that white on the edge. I can see it. Now I'm going to take my favorite color to make green, and that happens to be Antwerp blue. So I'm activating my Antwerp. Again, I'm touching this pure blue onto the shadow side, which you can see what's happened already. It's turned into a green. I don't really have many greens on my palette. I like to mix them all right on the paper. Just like you saw here, I like to mix the color on the paper. So now we've got pretty much the white of the paper going into some yellow, going into the green. Now I'm going to tip the paper just a bit so it'll roll around. This way you get the illusion that the stem is really round. Now one thing that looks terrible is your stem is way too green if you don't put a little bit of the color of the flower in the stem. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to steal just a little bit of my alizarin crimson. I'm going to put it right into the stem, just a little bit into the shadow side. I'm going to let that color roll around. You can see it immediately got darker and warmer. That's what I wanted. Now another unique thing about the stem on a poppy is it is fuzzy. So by turning my brush over, I can make these very nice little fuzzy shapes. Love this. And I'll even put a few on the other side. But I always like to caution people, don't do it too much, because what happens, it looks like a big caterpillar climbing up the center of your picture. So just a little bit on each side. Oh man, that looks nice. And because we're incising the paper, later when it comes time to add the masking, you don't have to worry about masking those little thin things because they'll just be there. Now, poppies actually have kind of a little bit of a white to them. So I'm going to put a little bit of salt in there. And I'll show you later how nice that salt is going to react. It's going to look great. Well, you can see as I was off camera, I finished up all the poppies, and I'm now ready to put in just a few more details. So I thought I'd just show you this. First of all, I'm going to take a little Aeolian yellow and a little Antwerp blue, and I'm just simply going to paint this center. And it's a very yellow green. I'm going to add a little more yellow to it. And just spot a little of that yellow green in there. Oh yeah, that looks so much better already. And then the same over here. We've got the center here with the green. And then I'm just going to go back into my alizarin crimson and phthalo green and simply put in these very dark little pistils and stamens. Suggest a little bit coming around the edge here. It's amazing what a difference putting that black in does. So this pretty much wraps up the flower, the poppy flower. But now I want to talk about the foliage. So a few more. I always put too many, I gotta be careful. You can also see that I wet the stems, put in the yellow, the Antwerp, and a little bit of alizarin, and did those little spiky things and added the salt. And I'm sure you're close enough at this point to see the little white shapes from the salt. That's actually how it looks. It's pretty cool. Okay, now I'm going to take and clean my palette a bit and work with the greens. And the foliage for the poppy is very much like a fern. And let's see, here I go. I've got a reference right here. So you can see it's very fern-like, and it goes between a yellow-green, a green-green, a blue-green, and a very dark color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all start with just about a number 6 round brush, and I'm going to wet it first. This is always the secret when you want to, remember now there's only 2 ways to paint flowers or foliage, or anything for that matter, and that's wet or dry. So every time I start a subject like this, I go, well, would I like this better if it was wet, or would I like it better if it was dry? And in this case, because I want to blend it fresh on the paper, I'm going to actually wet it first, and then I'm going to come in with my yellow. And again, I'm thinking my sun side's over here, so I'm going to put the yellow in on this side. And this is my Aeolian yellow. Now I am in the breakout area, so I don't necessarily want to leave too many whites. But if I were painting inside here, I'd be really worried about leaving some whites. But it's not really important out here because it's going to be against the white. So I'm going to start with my lightest yellow on the sun side, and then I'm going to take quinacridone gold. This is a much deeper yellow. So when you use this yellow, you get a deeper green. So on my shadow side, I'm going to put this darker yellow. So you can see already we're going to have the illusion of the light in the shadow. And we'll put this over here. Now when I come in with my Antwerp, which is such a great color for making green, it already has yellow in it, so it actually makes an excellent green. Now when I touch this in, it's going to be darker on the gold side and a little bit lighter on the sun side. We're just going to let it mix on the paper. And remember, this is very fern-like and it's picky. So I'm going to take my brush and pull some of these spiky little tips out. Doesn't look like too much is happening. Now I'm going to take some yellow, actually I'm going to take some gold and Antwerp and do a mixed green. And you can see now, ooh, this got nice and dark. So now I'm going to poke in some of this very dark green where I want it much darker, which is the shadow side, and some of the areas that are interlocking here with the flower. Going to get a lot darker because obviously they would be in shadow. That leaf would be over the top of this foliage, and we would want it much darker. So I'm just going to come in and kind of paint it on the shadow side here, leaving light, mid-tone, dark, light, mid-tone, dark. And that works really well. And then in some of the areas that are directly under here, I'm simply going to paint them directly, no tricks. Put paint on the end of my brush and paint what would almost look like a shadow image. And now I'm bumping into the edge of the paper where I'm going to have my breakout, so I have to be pretty good. Paint that really nice. Don't want to go outside that line. And then over here too, I probably will want to get into some of the darker values, almost like a shadow. Now if I really want this dark, think about it. What do I have to do to make this really, really dark? And I bet you've already figured it out. I'm going to want to take a little bit of the color of the flower. So I'm going to take just a little bit of this red and I'm going to drop it right in here. And you can see immediately it becomes darker. So I'm going to obviously drop some of that into my darkest darks here. Catch it before it dries. And over in here. And now if I were painting a purple flower, I'd be putting purple in. But because this happens to be a red poppy, I'm going to put in the red. So every time you paint a different flower, we're going to add a new color in here. And if I want to add a little sparkle, I could also add a little salt. So I think I'll do that. I'll just put in a little salt here and see what happens. Now I have one cute little guy here. I just realized I haven't painted the little bud. So I'm going to show you how I would paint a bud. The buds are fuzzy compared to the what's left when all the petals fall off. I don't know what to call that. Anyway, I could call this painting, "This Bud's for You." Now I'm going to start with my yellow. Again, I'm thinking of the sun side. So if I put the yellow over here on the shadow side, and I allow for a little bit of the white of the paper even to be saved, that would be great. Then I'm going to go into my Antwerp, and I'm going to put that also on the shadow side. And then these, in reality, these are very gray. See, the colors are mixing together now. We're getting some nice, soft, yellowy greens. I'm going to lift up just a little bit. It got a little bit hairy looking. Now, when you want to make gray, what you take are your complements. So if I take green and add a little bit of the color of the poppy to it, I'm going to get a gray. I think you can see it here on my palette. It's gray. And that's what color these are. But instead of mixing a gray, which I wouldn't think of doing, I would rather put a little bit of this red in here and let it turn gray on the paper. So I'm adding the same thing again. This happens to be my alizarin, but I could have used any of those reds. Now I'm going to just soften that a little bit. And here's the fun part. I'm going to turn my brush over, and because these are fuzzy, I'm going to simply let a few of these little fuzzies, see, and if I pick this color up here, I could even make a few fuzzies over here. I guess I'll have to pick it up off my palette. So we'll get a few fuzzies on this side too. The other thing that looks good is just a little bit of salt in there. So we'll just have to see what happens, because salt takes a little bit of time to set up. So there we are. We basically have gotten in some of the foliage coming up, interlocking with the shapes, and our little bud. And so when I come back, we're going to start painting the coneflowers. Okay, the next flower we're going to work with are the coneflowers. And the coneflowers are really very exciting to paint. They have this big, showy center. And you can see by this photograph where the sun is coming in. So we're going to also be dealing with the fact that we're working with the sun side and the shadow side. That gives a nice feeling of volume. An interesting little thing about these flowers, I didn't figure it out for quite a while. When they're just opening, they're very small centered and flat. And then as they mature, the center grows taller and taller till it turns into this gumdrop shape. So I purposely added one with the shorter top, one with the taller top, and then a little bud that just opened. So in something like this, I'll just look for my favorite ones and do generally 3 flowers. 2 is okay too, but you're always safe with an unequal number. So I'm going to start with the center. Now the center, my sun side is coming from the opposite direction than that photograph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I'm going to go around my palette here. So I'm going to start with my bright yellow, and over here, because it's a spiky little thing, I'm going to just stroke it into these little spikes. Then I'm going to go from my primary yellow into my gold, quinacridone gold, and right on top of that, I'm going to start stroking in some of the gold. And then I'm going to move around here to my Scarlet Lake. This will give me a nice repetition of this color bouncing over here. My paper is dry, but as I bump into each color, they become kind of a wet into wet. Now I'm going to go into my quinacridone burnt orange. Now if I want my colors to be activated, which I do, I'll just take my fine mister and give my paints a little squeeze of wetness. And a fine mister is one that has the narrow inner tube in it. So just with a little mist, it's so much easier now to come in here and my paints will be activated. And I want to keep these colors wet so that when I start putting the color down the side, you're going to see a nice little surprise happen. So now I'm going to go into my alizarin crimson for my last color here. So it's going to give the illusion of light to dark. And just because I took so much time here, I'm going to wet that again too. Now, the coneflowers come in a pinky flower and a white, green, quite a few colors. I think because I have so much red in here, I am going to make these white, which means I'm going to interpret them using my cobalt blue. So when I do the cobalt, what I do is I think of the sun coming this way, so I'm going to leave the white of the paper, and they have these kind of stripy feel to them. So what I'm doing basically is half of the petal is in shadow, the other half is in the white paper. Let me do that again. A few little stripes here, and then this nice cobalty blue color on the shadow side. But what I want to happen is I want a little bit of this color from the center to roll down here. It isn't exactly rolling down, so you can see I'm just pulling it down. And that's going to give the illusion of a little shadow, a little reflected light. So here we go again, basically half blue, half white. Ah, that's more like it. Ooh, I like it when it does it like that. Coming over here, white, a few little stripes of the blue, and then I come along here, touch this in. You can see the color is going to roll down. Go for it. And it looks like I'm putting a lot of blue on here, but it's amazing how light it is later when I paint the dark background on. But it does look like it got a little dark in here. I'm going to lift just a little bit. I almost never blot my paper with the tissue. See how I'm lifting the color with my brush. This is called the thirsty brush. And then I'm going to come in here, saving the white of the paper, putting the shadow on the shadow side. And that little petal there is underneath. So it's going to be mostly in shadow, but I'll still leave just a little bit of light on the sun side. Because I'm not touching this color, I'm just going to put it in. Lift a little color from here, put it in down here. Same here, put a little bit down here. I really like to have that little bit of color mixing in there. And see how it goes from the light to the orange to the darker color, all by itself. And this gives me that nice bounced light. Now when it comes time to do the stem, I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to wet the stem, and see it's down here too. Wet it. Going to come in with the pure yellow, using my Aeolian. I could use Winsor. Those are my two primaries, Winsor yellow and Aeolian yellow. Now I'm going to go into my Antwerp blue, again on my shadow side. You can see, ooh, it's already looking way too green. Ooh. We know what to do to fix that. So first the yellow, then the blue, now we've got the green. Now I have to decide which of these colors I want to add. And I think the quinacridone burnt orange would be a nice choice. So I'm now taking the color that's in here, and I'm going to put it into this stem. Oh, what a difference. It's fantastic. So we'll just roll that down basically on the shadow side, all the way to the bottom of the paper here. Now these stems are a little fuzzy too, so if you want to, you can do the same thing. Turn your brush over and just give them a little bit of a fuzziness. And they also have funny little spots on them. So again, if you want to, you can put just a little bit of salt. Sometimes I'll even put a little salt in that center. So I'm going to turn the camera off and finish these two cone flowers. They'll be the same way, and when I come back, we're going to paint our black-eyed Susan. Okay, while you were gone, I just went ahead and finished this cone flower right here. And if, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but I did put a little salt in the center, so it gave me even added texture. And of course, what I'm going for now is the sun and the shadow. Don't outline the shapes. This is a very common mistake. People take like the blue and they outline it. That's flat. That doesn't show volume. If you can show half of this as white and half of this as shadow, you're going to feel the light, feel the volume. And so now we've added all the stems, and notice how some of the stems are warmer, some are cooler, but they all have a little bit of the feeling of the sun and the shadow. That's good. And this turned out kind of cute. When this is masked, that lovely little bit of white there is really going to pop. So now the next thing I'm going to do is just put on a little bit of the this little rascal here. They're a little spiky and they're kind of yellowy. So I'm just going to put a little bit of like a yellow actually a yellow-green color at the base here, coming up. Put a little bit of Antwerp in with my yellow. I'm just going to put a little touch of that yellowy green at the bottom. And most of these are going to be white. So when they're masked, it'll really look lovely. They'll pop out into that dark background. So try not to paint the whole thing. If you can save the white of the paper, even on something as lowly as that little bud. And now I'm going to add a few little yellowy green leaves here. And this little rascal will have been painted, because the rest is going to be painted simply by adding the mask onto those lights. And then over here I have a cute little stem coming out. I'm going to take a little of my Aurelian, a little Antwerp, and I'm going to make a greeny color. And you can actually use like an oriental brush technique. Put your tip up, take and press down, it'll get thicker, and then as you release, it will get thinner. So there's all kinds of nice little, these little strokes you can do that are just simple, thick, thin. If you need to, you can make it a little bit wider. So that's often how I'll come in and paint some of these stems. Now can you see how that looks too green? Ooh, be sure you come in before it dries, add just a little touch of the quinacridone burnt orange. Give it just a little touch so it doesn't look quite so raw. Good old raw green, we don't want that. This is why I don't like to use mixed greens. I just love mixing them on the paper fresh. Well, now we're going to move into the Black-Eyed Susan. This definitely is a ditch flower. And this is a photo that I took literally along the edge of the ditch. And they have this dark, warm center. Sometimes you can see the color spilling out into the petals. And see, when you look at this photograph, they're very flat. They're pretty much the same yellow. Although this one here is starting to show the sun side and the shadow side. See how much lighter this petal is, how much darker this petal is. So I'm purposely going to push that concept. So I'm going to start, this time I'm going to use my Winsor yellow. And because this is a breakout, now I still have to put color on it. But I'm painting on dry paper. And I left some little white shapes there. Now I'm going to come in here, right along the top, leave some little white shapes. And on this side, we're going to go into the gold. So you can see how harmonically now we've made two colors, the yellow and the gold. Here too, I'm going to put just a little touch of the gold at the base. Now we've painted the two flowers that were in the white, so I had to put a little more color on those. But now I'm starting to think about leaving some white right along the edge of this flower. So if I come in here, dry paper, and I have some little white stripes about halfway across, I'm going to switch to my gold. Mix it in with that color and continue to the other side of the shadow side here. Now, to add even further harmonic benefit, I'm going to add just a little bit of orange to this. So now we've gone from the white of the paper to the Winsor yellow, into the gold, now into the orange. So each petal, it's starting to get a little bit darker. Here we have, again, our yellow on the sun side, a little bit of the white paper. I'm going into the gold. Now I'm going into the orange. Oh, that really looks good. Let's start again. We're going to go into the white and the yellow. in the gold. And then the orange. Now the other thing I want to do is this petal underneath here. See how this is turning over and going under? I'm going to take the orange color and paint this under petal orange. And that's going to give us the illusion that it's in shadow. This is my Windsor orange. It's a lovely orange. A little bit too much water in that one. And we only have one little petal left to go, and we don't have to worry about the yellow. So we'll start here now with the gold and go into the orange, because we're basically on the shadow side. Now when it comes to the center, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same idea. We're going to start with the yellow, go immediately into the gold, because these centers are very dark. I'll put that up here. They're very dark. But I don't want to paint them just dark. That doesn't sound like a good idea. So I'm going to go from the gold into my Scarlet Lake, much deeper orange than the Windsor orange, much warmer. Again, it gives a nice echo of our poppies. I always like to think about that. And now I'm going to go into my quinacridone burnt orange. Remember, this is like my substitute for burnt sienna. Very beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful color. It's a Daniel Smith color. Now the last thing I'm going to do to make this dark is I'm going to go to the complement. So if I go over here to my Antwerp blue, and I put the Antwerp blue on top of this, I'm going to get dark. So see, now we're going to have that nice dark center, but we're going to have the glow of those warm colors underneath. Love it. And actually I should have put a little bit of alizarin in there too. So I'm going to add some alizarin at this time. And that'll make it darker, and it'll also make it warmer. I wanted this center to be quite warm. Now if we want to get some of those nice orangey streaks in there, I like to take the quinacridone burnt orange to do that. So I'm just going to do it right now and just pull out a few of those nice little orangey streaks right down the center. How fun. Beautiful flower. And of course the stem is going to be the same way. We're going to wet it, come in with our yellow on the shadow side, come in with our Antwerp blue on the shadow side, and now we have to decide what color are we going to use to give us the benefit of that color reflecting in there. Looks to me like we should do our quinacridone burnt orange again. Ah, beautiful. Just amazes me every time I do this. I love it. Doing it while it's wet like this. Look at that pure, beautiful color. Now if you forget to echo the color of the flower into your stem, you can always do it later by simply wetting the stem and just glazing the color over the top. But it's much better to do it now while it's still wet, because what happens then is the colors blend. When you do it later, it's just a layered color. Still looks nice, but it looks better when you do it like this, a la Prima style. Then I'm going to throw just a little bit of salt in here. And how exciting. When I come back, I'm going to be adding some weeds, and we're going to get started with our background. Okay, we finished up some of the little foliage and that little bud on the yellow flower. And I'm now thinking about adding some weeds in here, just some delicate weeds. So in order to facilitate that, I'm going to do the taping first. Then if the weeds happen to bump into the edge, over the edge of this line, I don't have to worry about it. So when I do the taping, I just use a masking tape. And it's a fairly lightweight masking tape. I like the kind that's about 2 inches wide. And I just get this at a Menards store or a hardware store. It's no big deal. The thinner and the lighter the weight, the better. And when you're on Arches paper, the Arches paper can take this taping. Some of those softer papers, like I talked about earlier, it's a little dangerous and you have to test the masking tape on the paper so you're not lifting any of the surface of the paper. There is a tape out there called white artist tape. That will not do the job. The white artist tape will not hold the color, and any overlapping of the tape is a disaster for leakage. So we're going to use our good old masking tape here. Now this line, I have to pretty much follow very carefully this line. So I'm going to run this tape up to the edge of the line. I always try to get like a hair under the line if I can. Just a hair. Reason for that is then I take my eraser and I erase the line. That way, if I'm fortunate enough to have a lovely little white area moving your eye into the subject, then I don't have to deal with a pencil line. So you can see this is all I have to do on this. This is the simple one, where we're just doing a standard breakout. So the taping is also very simple. You put the tape down, a hair on the other side of the line. I hope my head isn't getting in the way, but there you go. Then I take my eraser and erase this line. Oh, this is so incredible. So you can see just that little bit of a hair on the other side hasn't really changed the dimensions at all, but it has given us the elimination of that graphic line. And I don't want any of those little particles there of tape. Okay, now the most important element. There's always a danger that when you do this, that some of this color could actually leak under the tape, especially at the corners. So here is your ticket to success. Take a credit card, something flexible. I wouldn't use something metal or something too hard because you could damage the paper. But just a credit card, and with just a little pressure all the way around here, this will ensure that you can actually see the pressure here. And then especially on the corners, I always do the taped edges. And then you still might have some leakage, and I'm going to show you how to clean it up. But at least we've got that pretty much assured. Now this is the cool part. I'm going to show you how to do these weeds. So I'm just simply going to pour out a little of my white masking. And I should actually be using a masking with a little color to it so you can see. So if I take a little non-staining color and mix it in here, I think that might work. Because this is a white masking, and this is what I like. I like a white masking. But I'll just give you a little bit of color here. I put a little cobalt in there, so it'll gray it just a bit. And I'm going to make these weeds. And the fun thing about these weeds is I actually use the weed to do it. So what I'm thinking about doing is adding some kind of an intersecting weed shape into the background. So by simply taking masking, if you have some of that masking that's the color of fluorescent orange or yellow or green, use it up. This is a good time to use it up. But I prefer to use a clear masking, so of course I'm going to do it with my clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply design this weed shape here. And then I'm going to pick up the masking and make the stem. And I can go right over everything now because I'm using the masking, and that will go behind it later. Then if you look at this, there's actually all kinds of very interesting little shapes breaking off of this. And then there's even shapes breaking away from this. So I think what I'm going to have to do is show you this on a dark surface so you can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to try doing this now on this black surface so you can actually see what I'm doing. So here I am stamping the head, and then I'm going to take my palette knife and pick up the color and actually do the stem. And then as I look at the intricacy in here, ooh, this is so fun. Just using this narrow point of the stem, now I can just come out, have a little fun with this. Kind of zigzags around. So I'm using a palette knife that's quite small with a flexible tip, a little bit of a round edge on it. And see if I have a few of these breaking out. I'll just have to add another selection of these. So it shouldn't be this easy. I think you're going to enjoy this part of it. But don't forget to put all those lovely little intricate, it's hard to say that, little zigs and zags. Gives you a good chance to observe what it really looks like. And then eventually I bring this all the way down to the bottom of my painting, but because everything is painted, this masking is going to, it's all going to be in the background. So I always do the weeds last. So you'll see how that turns out later when we put the background wash on. Now once again, we're ready to do the masking, and as I went over most of this masking, forget it. Bingo.
2.
Oh boy, this is the exciting part. Everything is taped, masked, and we're ready to think about where we're going to put in our darks and our lights. And remember now this roadmap, oh boy, this is so important. Just takes a minute of your time, and it's like painting the picture. So the first thing I'm going to think about is where am I going to put my darkest darks? And of course it's going to be behind those white flowers. So that's an easy one. And this little guy up here would look good. And of course I've got those weeds that you can't see, but I've painted some weeds back here. So I could actually go up and touch the edge up there. And then this little guy would be cute in dark. And this would look good dark. So I can move that along. So you can see I've already got a nice swooping pattern of dark, zigging and zagging. But this would look good against a light. But you know what? I could, because of these light edges, zig down here and put a dark pattern coming in, touching the edge here. And then I could actually zig down here a bit too and touch these edges and come down here for a dark. So I actually like my little dark pattern. That was quick and easy. Let's go. I'm going to take my 1.5 inch brush and I'm going to wet only up to the edge of the tape. So you have to be careful. Don't be going onto that tape edge. Especially here where we're back up against the white paper up here. See, this edge is thoroughly protected. I've got a little white down here. So I have to be careful. I'm going to take Looks like I'm getting a little bleeding. Those are just those little bit of edges there that I didn't quite cover with masking. Now if you get any big edges and realize you missed something, you're better off to stop, dry the paper, and start over. That certainly has happened more than once. But everything's protected. I know I have just a couple little edges there. And see, I already have a slight little toning. I have to live with that too. So now it's very important that it's properly wet. So I'm going to go right exactly up to the edges here and around. And then I'm going to make sure I haven't missed any parts by carefully going around. I see I'm a little wet. I'm lifting just a bit of water. Now we're ready. Ooh, this is so exciting. So I'll get my brush ready. That means I'm going to put it in the water, shake out the excess water, and I'm going to start with my Winsor Yellow. This is a glorious color. And see, any areas here that are light like this, I can actually go in and put down these light colors. So I'm going to come in and put this yellow behind that flower, and I think it would be just fabulous behind this. And see, I do want to touch my edges to identify where that edge is breaking into the light. And if I'm lucky, I'm going to try to get some white shapes coming in here too. I may not be totally lucky with that, but we're going to give it a try. And I'm thinking I'd like, maybe I'll just pull this yellow through over here a bit. So we've got a nice triad of yellow going here, and I think I'll put a little yellow down in the corner. And I'm thinking about doing blue for my, Antwerp blue for my dark. So what I want to do at this point is I still want to get in a repetition of this pinky color. It's really important that some of the color of your primary flowers is echoed in the background. So I'm actually going to come in and put in a little bit of this pink. I'll link it with the edge of the paper, and I'm going to come in maybe over here, go up to the edge again, and maybe I'll come in, this is going to be my dark, but it won't hurt if a little bit comes in here. So you can see we're echoing that pink. Ooh, that's so lovely. Maybe I'll just put a little bit down here too. Now comes the real excitement. And this is our dark. This is the Antwerp. And I didn't want to use cobalt. Cobalt's a wimpy color. It never gets much darker than about a value 5 or 6. But Antwerp, I think Antwerp goes almost to a 9. So when I want to smack in dark, we're talking dark. So I'm going to put this, there's my pattern. I'm going to come in here, punch it in, and come up here, punch it in. And then I remember I talked about pulling this over here and coming down this edge, punching out the edges here, coming down. And then I'm going to come over here and punch this in too. So that's pretty exciting. Now we've got all these colors laid in, and the next thing I want to do is have a little party with these colors. So I'm going to have a tissue ready because I know they're going to start running. So at this point I like to catch some of the drips. Then I like to take my finger, and when they run, I will give them a little encouragement here. And I like to have the colors mix. I think that's important. Now because the flowers are horizontal, or vertical, they go up, I generally make the first movement in the opposite direction. So we're going to get some of these colors to blend. We should start seeing some purples and some greens and a few other colors happening here. I could have been in trouble, but I knew that this edge was protected, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so we've gathered up some of the extra color here. We've gone back and forth a bit. Now let's go this way. Back and forth this way. Let some of these colors blend. See, I love it when some of that blue gets into the yellow. Some of the yellow gets into the blue. Some of the pink goes into the blue. See, some beautiful things are happening in here. Ooh, I like that. You can see already it's starting to settle down quite a bit. Those great big gobs of color that were floating all over have really settled down a lot. Because everything's masked, we're always going to have color budding up against these stems. So that's why I have to get in here with my finger. See, I've got a little block right here. It stopped here. I would actually like to have a little bit of that white go to the other side. Look at, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to pull that white out across. I like that look. I really like my lights. And I actually wish I had a little light here. Now I can't lift this light away with my tissue. That would dry the paper. But I can lift it with what we call a thirsty brush. I can take a little bit of the color away. But what it does is it leaves the surface wet. I've got a little light here that I like. So I think I might just lift away a little bit. Okay, now we're getting to the point where I have to decide, am I dark enough? Do I want to go darker? And the answer is yes, I want to go darker. Now one thing I could do is I could take gold and mix it with the Antwerp, and I could come in here with a lovely blue-green. But I'm thinking this is such a dominant red in here, I'm thinking that I might just come in and add some of this pink color into my blue, just to bounce it back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, clean my brush so I don't have that same disaster. Get some white, clean water here. And I'm going to take a little bit of this pink, which happens to be my permanent rose, and I'm going to punch a little bit of this into my dark. Of course it turned purple, imagine that. So that's going to be the last I'm going to do with my, just this wash of color. But now I have to stabilize it. As soon as you add more moisture like that, you've got to stabilize it. So we're going to let these colors go back and forth, do their little horizontal thing first. Back and forth, then we'll go up and down. Ooh, lots of color in here. Now we'll look for colors that are trapped. See, that pink is kind of trapped in there. So I'm going to pull it out a bit. Kind of trapped in there. This looks like a bleed back is starting. I'm going to come in with my sprayer and just mist it a bit. I don't want to have any bleed backs. I think we're out of the woods there. So now I'm at the rock the baby stage. I want to get this stable. And that's why it's important to see me do this wash more than once, because there's so many things to remember. I have to really think about it every time. I'm going to pick up a few of these big drips that look like they could take off on me. And meanwhile, it's getting pretty stable. That's it. So now the very first thing I like to do is I like to come in with my little script brush. Now this is my number 3 script. It's smaller than a round brush. It has fewer bristles. And by taking my Windsor yellow and a little bit of Antwerp blue, I can make a beautiful light yellow. And what I want to do is I want to create some out of focus leaves. And these are just going to really fuzz out. I mean, we're talking really fuzz out. So I'm just going to put a few of these in, knowing they're just going to fuzz right out into the background. This is pretty fun stuff. And I think I'll do another one. I'm going to really juice up the yellow. And I don't have a lot of room, but I'm going to do a little bit of this. I always start with the light colors first. So here you can see we've got the suggestion of a yellow, green, grassy something going on here. And then these weeds, I want to do some of these weeds out of focus too. So I think what I'll do is mix a very dark green. So to make a dark green, I'm going to start with my gold. And I'm going to take a very rich mixture of quinacridone, gold, and Antwerp blue. Ooh, look at that. That is dark and it's gorgeous. And what I want to do is I want to make some of these weeds. So I'm going to do it the easy way. First of all, I'm going to take some of these weeds. Let me try that again. I should have picked some fresh weeds. These are all dried up. Okay, I get to try it again. We're going to do it again. So I'm going to dip the weeds into this mixture. And I'm going to first put a few of these darks right on top of the weeds that I already did. Oh yeah, that was a good idea. And if this little rascal holds up, I'm going to suggest a few more. One here, and I think I'll do another one maybe down in here. Oh man, I got more weeds on the surface than I do. So I'm going to mix up another juicy batch of this. Again, it's the gold and the blue. And we'll stamp that in there. Oh, cool. And now using my script brush, this time I'm going to come down and put in some of those extra lines, some grassy appendages. You can see how they have the grass. Now using my tip straight up, I'm going to come down and add that stem and then some of those grassy strips, some of the connecting shapes. And everything I do is going to go into the background. That's the good news. I don't have to worry about it. Even though I'm painting over the top, it's all protected. And see, even some of these need to have some dark shapes going up behind them. And it's all going to fuzz out. Now, one of the things I want to do is I want to repeat some of the foliage that you would see with the coneflower. And I like to do this in a cluster. In other words, I like to have, I don't want to go straight up the middle. And what I'm thinking about doing is moving over here and doing a cluster of this foliage behind the poppy. And then later, I'm going to come up with the grass going right behind it. So you can see I've got my brush in a straight up position, I'm going to come up over here through the coneflowers up here. Now the first grasses always go up. And then we'll do another one up. Another one up. And then we'll start our downward climb. So see, I just paint on top of all that to get the most natural looking grasses. I'm going over the ones that are already out of focus. This is really fun. And you try not to get them so they're all going the same direction. Some up, some down, some crossing over. Some can go over that weed I did. Some coming this way, over that. Ooh, fun. And of course, I didn't make enough mixture. I've got to quickly make up another one here. So we're very close to being done with our out of focus. This was pretty fun to do, I'll have to say. I think I might do one little skinny weed shape over here. It's getting a little bit neglected. So I have one coming up over here. And when you're doing a grass, the first grasses always go up. And then they start going downward. That's good. The other thing that would be a good thing to do would be to do the suggestion of some of this poppy foliage out of focus. So you can see I've got some very crisp in focus here. So it wouldn't hurt if I just came in and suggested some of the foliage for the poppy. And see, this will fuzz out, which makes a really nice effect. It's kind of fern-like, a little spiky. And my paper's drying, so the more I fuss with this, the more crisp. See the difference between the first one and the one I'm doing now? Each stroke gets to be a little bit more crisp. Or maybe it's crisper. And maybe it's crispier. I don't know. Anyway, you'll notice a difference. So there we have it. One thing I'm very pleased about is this lovely little white shape coming in. Two of them. I have a light area here. That's going to work. If I wanted to add salt, this would be the time to add salt. But you know, I really want to keep that background graded wash pristine. So I think I'm just going to leave it. And when I come back, I'm going to be adding some very crisp elements to it. Well, we're at the fun part again. Before I haven't taken off any of the masking because definitely this time I want to do some crisp, dark edges of grasses in the background. But in order to do that, I want these grasses to break out into our taped edge. So I am going to remove the tape. So far, so good here. And whenever you're removing the tape, be very careful when you're next to these edges of the paper, because it's very easy to rip the edge of the paper. So be really, really careful. For example, here, where it's actually touching the edge. So a safe way to do that would be to tear it like this, away from the edge. Oh, of course, that's going to happen. We're going to tear it away. And this is pretty exciting stuff. Now, I see I got a little ambitious here when I pulled this off. I did lose a little bit of color on my red, on that particular red. Could be there was just a little moisture there because I did paint this today. In fact, just hours ago. I I thought I dried it carefully, but maybe I didn't. So ideally you should wait another entire day, but of course we're rushing. We've got our filmer here and our camera and we had to go for it. That is something I can simply fix. Put another layer over it and I'll be able to fix it. So what I want to do now is I want to put some dark, crisp, grass-like shapes, and I want to link these shapes with the edge of the paper. See, here I'm actually touching the edge of the paper. That's really good. But I'm not touching the edge of the paper here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to take some of my gold, because this is a really, really nice dark color, and I'm going to mix in some Antwerp blue, which gives me a really fresh, bright green. I like this green very much. And I need to get enough of this so that once I start, I don't have to mix it again. And I'm using my script brush again. And when the paper is dry, you have to be especially fluid with the paint. It goes on real smoothly when you're working into a wet surface like we were on the underpainting. But now I'm on dry paper. The paper's got a little bit of a bump to it. So what I have to do is I have to mix up a very juicy mixture with enough water to be really fluid. Can't be a dry mixture. So this looks like it's going to work. What I want to do is, remember I talked about the clustering. So I don't want to mess this lovely soft area up, but I would like to come through here and add some grass-like shapes. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to come up, but I have to remember it's only masked here. This is not protected. So now I'm going to come through here and go off the top of the page. And when I paint grasses, I put my tip up, press down, and release. Tip up, press down, release. Tip up, press down, and release. Tip up, press down, and then release. Tip up, press down, and see now this is not protected here, so I have to be careful, and then it'll come down here and release. Hey, tricky. Tip up, press down. Let's see, it probably will come out over here somewhere. So I'll pick that up, press down, and release. And now it gets easier. Tip up, press down, release. Everything down here is protected. Tip up, press down, release. Tip up, press down, release. And see, they go up to begin with, and then they start going downward, the actual petals of the grass. And it's really fun to do this. In fact, it's like eating potato chips. You have to be careful because you can do too much. It's very hard to stop. Help, take it away. Okay, now I'm going to mix up another little batch here, dark, more Antwerp and gold. Ooh, that was easy. And I'm going to do another grass-like shape coming off the edge here. So again, I'm going to go up, through, and I have to remember, there's no masking on that part. And then tip up, press down, release. And the first petals go up. Tip up, press down, release. Tip up, press down, it'll probably come out in here somewhere. Tip up, press down, release. Tip up, press down, release. And this is, like I say, way too fun. I would love to just get really carried away. That's probably good enough. So now we have the reaching out to the edge that I feel is so important. So now we can simply grab our masking, and if it looks like I'm going to lose a little color. I'm going to wait till tomorrow, but I am going to pull off. The red is the most likely color that you will lose the color underneath. Even with all the protection I talked about, it's the most likely color to lose. See, it's trying to lose a little there too. So what I'm going to do is wait, and tomorrow, chances are it'll come off and I won't lose any color. And this can happen when there's a lot of humidity in the air too. Like I was telling you about when I was teaching over in Ireland, it rained every day and I was in this pub. And believe me, it was damp and dark and cold in there. And we had problems all the time with the moisture. Ooh, isn't that exciting? See how you get back the whites. The whites are just so beautiful. So I had to show you those. And we'll just do one more pull here. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do is I want to show you these little weeds. And they almost always need a little bit of dressing up. Because if you remember, we only did them with masking. And so they're going to need just a little bit of softening. So what I usually do is poke in just a little bit of water. And then I might come in often. See, I've got a little magenta color here. So actually just toning this with a bit of magenta would be nice, because they did get a little on the big side. This size actually is a little better down here. And then sometimes I'll even take a little bit of that cobalty look that the background has, put a little bit of that in there too. So I don't want them to take too much precedence. I think they're a little bit on the, demanding a little bit too much attention. So just by softening. And then this in here is a very soft green. So we'll just simply tone that into a soft yellowy green. And then where it looks like I kind of missed a few there, I might come in with my darker green and just come in and structure it just a little bit more with a few darker shapes. So you just do whatever you can to make it work. Take away a little bit of the attention. You can see how this is way too attention getting. And the darker I make this, the more equal I make it to the background, the less attention it will demand. But right now, being stark white, it's really demanding a lot. So I think we're at the final stage here. I've got a lovely mat with a black core to put on. So let's take a look at it in its final glory. And there you have it. The simple white rectangular shape breaking out. Nice repetition of colors, overlapping shapes, edges that, shapes that are touching the actual edge of the paper. In fact, I might go up just a bit more. And so now we'll move on to our final lesson, where we'll be working with the asymmetry. We're ready to start our third demonstration. Now on this one, the whole idea is we're going to start breaking out irregularly. In other words, it's not going to happen with just a rectangle. We're going to try to make it a little bit different. And for example, here's one where I came down in a narrow path with breaking out on each side, and then I came out down here with another narrow corner. The old idea again of the three white corners. which seems to work pretty well. And of course I had a lot of fun with this being the Morning Glories. They have all these climbing things, and I may have gotten a little carried away with it, but I couldn't help it. That gave me permission just to have a good time with that. And then this one here, for example, is the petunias, and a similar kind of idea, coming down, breaking out, and here even breaking out of the bottom of the picture. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start designing how I want to break out of this. I got out my ruler again. I think one of the first things I want to do is come in and have several things breaking out. And I was thinking of having this be a corner, this having a shape going through it to draw attention to it. So let's start with the lines coming down. Remember now, don't go through the actual image. Just go up to it and then keep going. And you know, I'm not sure that that was such a good idea now that I see I'm heading right for what would be a tangent. Good, we get to try this again. And that's kind of a tangent there too. That we can do better. Let's try that again. Let's try coming in so we'll end up about here. I like that better. Yep, and then everything is sort of breaking. Much better spot. Okay, so we got this, little corner right here, and off the top. And then over here, oh yeah, I like that a lot better, especially with this coming in. Much more interesting little corner. Now over here, I think I want to go through that little hole right there. Ooh, that looks like fun. We'll end up right about here. So let's line it up with the edge of the paper. We're going to start here, up to here, right through that hole. See? Ooh, we're already off to a fun start. Now I'm thinking about how I want to break through here. And I don't want to cut the flower in half. Do I want to go lower? Do I want to go higher? I think in this case, I'm going to go up here. That is kind of half and half, isn't it? Let's go up a little bit higher. So right about here, we'll come in and I'm going to go across to the other side. And then we have to decide where do we want to break it here. I want to go off the page here, but I want to show a step down to a white here. So I think I'm going to come in maybe about in here. Let's move over a little closer. This is a very interesting size to work with if you've never worked with it. It's a long half sheet. You simply cut your paper in half the long way. I really like it. Uh-oh, look at, I've got a little tangent going here. Well, I'll show you how easily we can fix that. I'm going to take our eraser. Come out and go around. Okay, much better. Okay, now we're going to do just a couple more. I want to go out. I like to show the corner. Sometimes I like to have the corner completely exposed. So here you can see the corner, here you can see the corner. Both of these corners are hidden behind this flower. So I'm thinking about hiding this corner too. I think I will. I'm going to come in here and hide this corner, but then having it break out down here. So let's see. If we come down, now I don't want that little corner showing. I want more of this sticking out. I think I'm going to like this a little better right about in here. Now one should really measure from the edge, and I will do that later when the camera's off, but you don't want to have these lines crooked, so it just takes a minute to measure in. So now I like this, coming down, zigging down and off. So these are going to be what's white. My 3 corners are going to be white. And see, look at all the fun I can play with in here. Nothing is happening here. So this is just going to simply be color and out of focus things happening. So now I'm ready to start painting the flower itself. And this particular flower is the petunia. And the petunia has this dark center. Now the dark center, if it's facing you straight on, and I just happen, thanks to my film person here, Miss Becky, I just happen to have some of these. She walked down the street, and it's November, but these are still doing well. I mean, it's amazing. And so now you can see we've got a real petunia to look at. And one of the hardest ways to paint a petunia is to look at it directly. So it's the full circle. It's much more interesting to turn it on the side and have this part coming forward and that part going back. Or similar to what you see in the photograph here, you've got the petals coming forward, you've got this area that's dark, and then you have the petals coming out. So that's how I've approached most of these particular flowers. When I drew them so they have a part in the foreground. This will be the dark center coming out, and then it's going to come out here. So it's going to be painted in 2 parts, 2 parts, 2 parts, 2 parts, 2 parts. Lots more interesting. So just for the sake of getting started, let's start with that main petunia right in the middle here. And this is definitely one of those flowers you want to do wet. This particular flower paints itself. It's pretty amazing. You simply wet half at a time, the entire back half, not where, because what I want to do is I want to capture the light where it's touching the flower. See, when you look at a flower like this, it looks dark, the whole thing looks dark, but that's not the way we want to paint it. We want to paint it with the interpretation of the light hitting it. So usually that's why it works so much better to work with a photograph, because the photograph will do that for you. It will interpret where the light is touching the subject. So we have this wet up to the edge. Now once again you've got to go over this again. So I'm going to wet, come around, wet the edge, come around. I'm using a relatively small, it's about a number 10 round brush. Like I say, I like to have control. And I'm going to make a purple one, purpley pink, and I'm going to keep it a little more on the pink side. And what I like about working with purple is we have 2 colors to make the purple. First of all, we've got our pinky red, and then we have a blue. And in terms of what color choices, we have a lot of them on my particular palette because I like the pinky reds. So I could use my quinacridone coral. I could also use my permanent rose. I could also use my alizarin crimson. Any one of those are a pinky red, they would make a great violet. And then I could also use my French ultramarine blue, which already has red in it, or I could use my cobalt blue, which is a perfectly pure blue, no red, no yellow. I'm not even going to consider any of the blues over here between my cobalt and my Windsor yellow, because all of those blues have yellow in them. Ew, bad idea. So now see, if I pull that purple in here, look at how beautiful. If I pull that same purple in here, lovely. And if I pull that same purple in here. So you can see every one of those would make a very nice purple. So what I'm going to do, because I've been talking, I'm going to re-wet this a little bit. We definitely want to have the paint itself for this one. So if it's dry, it's not going to work. So what you try to do is you get enough water on here that the colors will flow, but not too much, so that it flows too much. I'm going to use the permanent rose. Now one of the things about permanent rose is it doesn't move very much in water. And I think about this when I'm painting flowers. So see, I can almost control how far I want that to go. And then when you think about it, the darkest dark is here, then the flower comes up, touches the light, and then it goes back again. So right now, I'm also going to be designing where it's touching the back here. Just using my permanent rose right now. And see, this is where I'm designing my white shape. Now a lot of people, when they do this, they come around and they paint an equal line, parallel equal line like that. That is a very bad thing. I want you to design this so that you're thinking about the shape of it. And it's coming in. See, this is going around like this. So I'm thinking about how it comes up and goes around. Ooh, that's fun. Goes around, goes around. And now I'm going to take my French ultramarine blue. This is a very warm blue. It's got some red in it. And I'm going to put this color right on top of that pink. Ooh, now it's starting to move. Like I say, it's starting to paint itself. And when I put this color on top of the pink, sometimes it's going to be warm and sometimes it's going to be cool. Depends on the mixture underneath it. And I'm going to get over here and I'll let this color, pretty soon I'm going to have to tip it to let these colors do their own thing. One of the things I don't like to stretch my paper, so I can actually get underneath here with my hand and force that to move back to the edges. I can also tip it like this and let it run into this deepest, darkest area here. Ooh, it's beating up. See how dark it's getting? That's good. Now we're going to tip it back and let it just roll. Now we're going to lay it flat again. See, now we don't have a lot of light left, but we have enough to create an interesting little pattern. I like it. Now the other thing I can do is I can take my palette knife, and there are veins. They're very, very obvious in this photograph. You can see these very strong veins, and they come around and they follow the shape, and then they branch out from each side. So you have to do this while it's still wet. So if I start here with just a little pressure from this, I can come out and bring it out to the edge, bring it into the center, either way. But I'm thinking always about the way this is turning. And now I can bring in veins to meet this. And this is pretty tricky stuff. You can do it with the back of your brush. You can do it with if you don't bite your fingernails, you can do it with your fingernails. But I don't like to overdo this. I try to keep it kind of subtle. So for example, if I do this on the back side, then I wouldn't do it on the front. So now when this dries, then we're going to go ahead and do the front part. So the next thing I want to do is to paint the petals. And you've already seen me paint petals where you wet it and put the color down. Think of the light source. Well, these I'm going to do a little differently. So if you look, the petals, the actual petals have very little veining to them. Very little. But they have some. So I'm going to match these up. Let's see. There, that's close enough. So I'm going to try a little painting right on the petal here. I'm going to start with my flat brush. And I generally do this by laying the petal on the table. And I'm just picking up the veins pretty much. So I'm using a little Windsor yellow. I'm going to add a little gold to it. I'm going to add a little Antwerp blue. And I don't expect really great results because this is, first of all, it's such a fresh piece. But we're going to see what happens using the actual petal. And I'm just going to press it down here really good. Not bad. So now I'm going to fix it up a little bit. I'm going to take and put a little Antwerp blue on here. And add a little bit. See, I know what, now I know what it looks like too. It kind of comes out from the edge like this. And then I'm going to wet this part. And I'm going to wet the stem. Put my color into the stem. This is a little gold. And then I'm going to put a little Antwerp. Again, thinking about my shadow. But I have my sun coming from the same side again. Only now I have purple flowers. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of this pinky, same pinky red. I'm going to put it into the stem. And I'm going to put it into this petal. So let's try another one. Here's a little bigger one. What'll this match up? Man, it's pretty close. Again, I'm going to work on the back side of the leaf. I'm going to use a flat brush, very rich color. Just brushing it on. Now I'm going to go into a little gold. And a little Antwerp. Trying to get flat, just trying to pick up that relief shape. So now we're going to lay it down here. And with my tissue, I'm going to press it. Lift it. Hey, not bad. So I don't plan to do all the petals like this, but what an opportunity. We just happen to have them growing down the street here. Can't beat that. Now the only thing missing is that little bit of the purple. So I'm going to take a little bit of my permanent rose, a little bit of my French ultramarine. I'm going to mix a purple, and I'm going to add this purple into this. Because it's very important to always repeat the color of the flower either in the leaf or in the stem. Oh, that's so much better. Pause. Okay, now this is dry, so I'm going to show you how to paint the other half of the petunia. And because this is the darkest area, now we want to have a light running along this edge. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to wet it again, the whole thing, not even where we want the white, we're going to wet it. So we come along here, wet it all the way out to the edge. And I know this takes a lot of time to watch me wet the paper, but it's very important. You don't want to have it too wet. You want the colors to kind of move on their own. See that lovely soft look. You can't get that any other way except wet into wet. So we're ready. This particular one I started with Permanent Rose, so I'm going to get my color activated on my palette. And this time I'm going to start it at the bottom. Now remember, none of this, no even line. Think about designing it. Think of the movement coming in, from the edge in. And we're going to leave this as a light along the edge, so don't put any paint there. All the way to the edge, in and in. And we like all those variations, as many variations as we can. Okay, then we're going to come in with our French Ultramarine Blue, activated on the palette here. Again, we're going to start at the edge and let it come in. And this is the ugly stage I was talking about. Don't panic. It's not pretty. You always think, oh no, what have I done? It's never going to work. Okay, now we're going to let it paint itself. We're going to lift it and let the edges run to the darkest edge. You can see it starting to pile along here. Ooh, we like that. And as soon as we've got it piled up pretty good, then we're going to tip it back the other way and let it run. And it seems like it even continues to run after you quit. So I'm going to leave that little extra margin there and soften this edge a bit here. And that's basically it. We're just going to let it sit. Now if I were to do any lines on this side, I might put a line or two, like for example where it's making a turn. I might say, okay, there's an interesting line. There's a place for a line. There's one there. So I might put one or two little suggestions of a line, but I would never put as many as I put up there. That would be way, way, way too much. Now the other thing that we can paint are some of these long stems. This part under here. See that part under there? And you can see that's kind of a grayed down color. It's fairly white. Sometimes they're more yellow, but in this case they're kind of a pinky gray. So I'm just going to go ahead and reach over here and paint one. Same idea. I'm going to wet it first, only this time I'm going to go down into the stem till I meet a leaf. And it's sort of pinky, it's sort of yellow, so I'm just going to start like this. I'm going to put the yellow on the stem and start the yellow here. And then I'm going to start the pink under here. And we're just going to let them, again, paint themselves. So the pink's going to roll down. We're going to add just a little touch of pink down here. And then I'm going to go into my Antwerp Blue, because this is a green stem. I'm going to let a little bit of that green run up into the base of the flower. So it's just fun. You paint, all the colors are just painted fresh. Now I'm putting a little pink in the stem. And because there's all these lines in there, I'm going to actually paint those lines right now. And there we have a little, one of the little under part of the flower. So I'm going to go ahead and finish painting this, And when I come back, I'll show you how to do the taping and put it in the background. There are a few little things I thought of that I'd like to share with you. Now when you are breaking out into what is the white area, it's going to stay white, then you want to be concerned that the edges are pretty well identified. So, but when you're inside here, then it's nice to have some of these edges that remain light. So just to give you an example, I'm going to paint, for example, on this little rascal, that kind of what I call the trumpet shape. It's the one that's the side view. I like to include a few of these. So now when I wet this little area, you can see I already painted this side, and I put the color on this side, allowing it to fade out into a white. So now when I come back, I'm going to want to put the darker color on this side. But if I allow that to fade out into the white, see, that's going to be white against white. So I just wanted to create an awareness that when you're having something breaking out into what's going to remain white, you're going to want to have to put a little color on both sides. It's not looking too good, but it's the way it is. And now I'm going to come in with just a little bit of my cobalt to add the blue to it. I think what I'll do is I'll just put the cobalt on that one side, and then that'll just break out into that lighter color. Now to show you the difference, on this side, now this is inside. I'm going to paint something relatively dark behind it. So this time when I wet it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this permanent rose, I'm going to put it on this side of the paper, let it roll up, and just let it stay light along there. That's the way I like to do it. And while it's still wet, I'm going to come in with just a little bit of cobalt, let that turn into the purpley color. So light against dark, and in this case, dark against light. And it's the same thing over here. Now you can see I painted this side, and I purposely made it dark there so I could give this side light and end up putting my dark along the edge here. So we'll wet this, drop the color along the edge, sure is fun to do. So again, I'm taking my permanent rose, and I'm just going to let it go up, keep it real narrow here, a little bit wider here. Try to get it irregular. Think about the movement again of that petal. And this is the ugly stage. Oh, I get nervous every time I do this. I think, oh, this is so ugly. But you know what? It always works out. So now we're going to put this cobalt again over it. And we'll let that roll up. So now you can see the real feeling of depth. We have the dark, the light, dark, light, and again dark. See how I had to, that's kind of tricky. I put the dark out here because it's against the light, but I saved a little white. Put it darker here because I knew that was going to be against the light. I think I'll tip this and let it roll back a little bit. And I think I might even go a hair darker here with the cobalt. Punch it a little more, especially since I went out of my lines. Gotta fix it, is what I'm doing. There. Now that looks darker than that, and that's always going to be a problem. But remember, it's going to dry 20% lighter, so you always have to push it just a little bit darker. Okay, another thing I noticed is these were getting very cool. I was pushing a lot of blue in them. So what I want to do is I want to paint one with just the pink, just to show you the difference. So I'm just going to do this one last petunia here. And again, we're going to wet it. And we're going to be very aware of the fact that part of the petunia is out here where it's always going to be light, and the rest of it's going to be inside. So here we can, if we can save a little light here and there. Wetting is really important. You might even want to try wetting one on a piece of scrap paper just to get the feel, how much water to use. And then that way you can try alizarin, and you can try your coral, try whatever pinky reds you have on your palette, because they all are going to react differently in water. Now this one I've decided to do just using my quinacridone rose or permanent rose. It's the same color, and I'm going to make it dark here, and I'm going to think about how I want it to move out and go around. And I'm going to keep this pretty light here because it's against the dark. Over here I'll come in with just a little bit. Out here I want it to be dark against the light. So you don't have to look at a photograph. You just look at the photograph to get some of your shapes and to get it drawn. But once it's drawn, I kind of like to let the painting tell me what to do. Now over here you can see I left this light against the dark, so I'm going to want to make it dark here against these light areas. And we want to vary it. I'm going to lighten up a little bit over here. And I'm going to come back in again and make it extra dark here. I'm just going to keep this one pink. So now we'll do the bending and get the colors to move a little bit. Remember, this is the color that doesn't move very much. It just amazes me. It doesn't like to move around. But it still gives this nice illusion of the soft edges that we're looking for. There's a new eraser out called the Oops eraser. I had to look everywhere for it. And my little film gal here is the one who finally found it on the internet. We now have a dealership from Cavallini Products out in Italy somewhere. And it's the only eraser that will erase pencil lines after you wet them. So see, when I go outside of the lines now, I don't worry about it too much, because now I know I can erase that line later with my new Oops eraser. And I might want to come in again and do the lines. So I'm going to start thinking about the movement, always thinking about the movement. How does that petal turn? And then coming in and forming some of these additional lines, make it real special. It's amazing how that changes. It really gives dimension. So I think adding that pink flower was a good idea. So keep in mind when you're doing this, the first time you do it, the darkest dark is here. As it comes up, the light touches it, goes back to the dark. But then when you do the second petal, you're going to do, as you see here, or here's a better example, you're going to only put the dark here rolling up to the light so that the light is a contrast to the dark center. So when this dries, I'll re-wet it, put my darks out here, and roll them up to the light. So I'm going to now complete this picture, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to do the taping. There's a special way to do the taping now that we have inside corners and outside corners. Well, now I've got everything painted, and I brushed off all the salt. I actually erased some of the extra lines that I didn't feel I wanted in the picture. And now I'm ready to do the taping. Now it's always been an easy matter where we just tape and tape over the tape. And what I've done is I've made my job really easy because 3 of my corners have a break out at the corner, which means I can just put the tape and line it up. And then over here, the same thing. I don't have to worry about the corner. Come in with the tape, just a hair on the other side of that line. And then I'll just cut off the extra tape here, burnish it with my credit card, and then erase this line. Now the reason I erase this line is in case I'm fortunate enough to have a lovely white shape coming in. So you can see with the corners protected here, I'm going to be fine with the masking. Here too, all I have to do is come down here, come out here, but now this is the one, this exposed corner right here is a little bit more difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tape, I'm going to butt it next to the line, and when I come down with the tape, you'll notice when I rub over the pencil line, it picks up the pencil line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it with a slight miter. I'm just going to go at the pencil line,
your head's in the way.
cut out of the way, just at a little angle, what I call a miter. And the same thing here. This time I'm going to cut it the opposite. I don't know what degree this is, I'm not worried. All I want is, I don't want to have a little edge sticking out where it shouldn't be. So now I'll just put this corner exactly into the corner. Look at that. Piece of cake. And now we have a mitered corner. So the only corners that are difficult are these corners that are exposed. Here it will be simple, just a piece of tape over a tape. Don't forget the burnishing. The burnishing, extremely important. Burnish also where the tape overlaps each other. And don't think that you're going to be protecting the edge by, say, putting a second piece of tape here. What will happen is I guarantee what the moisture and the color is going to go in here and create a long line. If you want to protect all this with tape, then you should start the tape on the outside edge and then put the second piece of tape over it, like the shingles on a roof. That way it will repel the water and you won't get that exposed line. So I'm going to go ahead and do the masking and I'll be back to put the color on. Okay, here we are on our final lesson. It's all taped, burnished, masked, ready to go. So I'm going to do, of course, my famous road map. This time I'm going to cut out these funny little shapes and step down, and then it comes up here and comes down. And what I've got in mind is basically to kind of weave yellow behind this, this, and this. Just kind of spiral some yellow through here. So what that's going to do is I'm going to be popping out darks up here and coming down here. And this pinky thing would look nice with the dark behind it, and these would look nice with the dark, and this would look nice. So we'll move a dark over here, and then this would look good with the dark. So we'll just, and I'm not going to go real dark. I really was pushing the dark on that last one. And then I definitely want to have some whites in here too. So now I feel like you're an advanced group. So now we're going to talk about not only designing dark shapes, but also designing some white patterns coming in. So I'm going to try real hard to get a white pattern coming in here. And maybe I could do, oh boy, I don't know how good I'll be at this, but maybe I could design another white pattern coming in there. And that, by a white pattern, I mean saving the white of the paper. This is not an easy task, but it's really important if you do it. So we're ready to start wetting the paper. Going to run it, here I go with the dirty brush again. Oh my goodness. Shake that out. Here we go. I'm going to start down here. And try not to go on the tape. I know it's hard to remember that. But don't go on the tape. And I just didn't. See, it's really hard. So go up to the edge of the tape, but not over it if you can help it. Don't wet the back, only the front. This is kind of a crazy shape, this long one, but it's going to be fun. I'm excited. It's one of my favorite shapes to work with. And I always re-wet it a second time to make sure I didn't miss anything. Ooh, last thing we want to have is a little dry piece that picks up a hard edge. We want this to all be soft. So I'm going to move this up. Move my paint over here, and we're going to get this cleaned up. Okay, I'm all assembled again here and ready to go. As always with watercolor, it's really smart to do light to dark. So that is precisely what we're going to do. I'm going to start with my Winsor yellow. And I'm going to put this yellow behind the purple. We're talking complements, so already it's looking pretty exciting. So I'm going to put some yellow here, and then I want to weave this, literally weave this through here. So I'm going to come in with the yellow behind the purple here, and behind this purple. Yes! Ooh, that feels good. Just singing right through the whole center here. And then of course I really believe in repeating the color of the flower. We happen to have that lovely permanent rose. And this color is so powerful, make sure you go from your paint to your palette, activate it. So now I'm going to come in and link some of this. Now remember, I want to have a little white there. So I'm going to try to keep that. And we'll weave that right over here. I think just a little hint coming up in here. And let's see, let's come down here. Come over, touch the edge. Come through here, over here. It's already looking like we're getting some almost hard edges. I don't want that. So right away I'm going to get that cleaned up. Now I'm going to come in with my Antwerp. Oh, this is such a beautiful color. And see, it is already a little contaminated from my last lesson. Let me do that again. Clean out my brush. Come in. There, much better. And I'm going to pop this behind these light areas here. And we're going to come around here, across here. Now whenever you come to a corner, always try to go around the corner. See, that felt good. And then I kind of want to come through here, zigging, zagging, moving. Let's do this corner. And then this is going to be our repeat again of the blue. Now I was thinking about a white coming up in here, so I better be careful. That's going to do it. So now we've got all this extra water. So I'm going to start doing a little tip and pick up a little bit of this extra moisture. For some reason I got awfully wet. And I'm going to tip that. Oh, there goes my white. We'll tip that over here. And pick up some of this extra moisture. Yes. Now I don't plan to do a lot with this. I just want to keep kind of soft, glowing colors behind this. Not doing too much tipping and turning, because with all three of these primary colors, see how quickly I could end up with mud. So I'm going to pick up some of this extra that's running here. See, it's already getting a little muddy over here. Let's run that off the corner. Right here. Pick that up. It's kind of pretty when it runs into the blue. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now we've got those really, it got really wet, but it settled down fast. Oh, I'm happy. Look at that beautiful glow. Yes! So over here I'm going to catch a little bit more of this extra. Over here. And now we'll kind of let it do the rock the baby thing. You can see the lovely glowing color. Catch a little up here too. I don't know how Becky is filming this. I'm wiggling the paper all over. Okay, now we're going to have a little fun. We're going to mix up some really bright yellowy colors for starters. So I'm going to go into my Winsor yellow with just a little teeny bit to make it kind of a greeny color. And one of the interesting things about this particular plant is the way the foliage is in so many different sizes. Unbelievable. You can have little teeny leaves and great big leaves. So this is what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to give the feeling that there's stuff curling around with little teeny leaves growing off of it. We'll do a few up in here. Some more of those little leaves. And let's have a few little leaves coming off from here, turning around. More of these little teeny leaves. They just are really, they're everywhere. Profuse is the word that comes to mind. So let's do something about that. And this is the part that's fun, but you only have this little window of time to do it. So when you want to do these, you have to move on it. Now I'm going to take some gold in Antwerp, go a little darker. I'm going to come in here and twist and turn a bit, paint some things out of focus. Everything I do is just going to be really soft and out of focus. See, now I'm going to leave that just really pristine. A few more leaf shapes. And see, every time I do this, I'm poking it just a little bit darker behind that light. That's kind of nice. Let's do some yellowy green here. Put a lot more gold in here. In fact, I'm thinking about going into this real yellow again. I think that'll be awfully pretty up here. And maybe just a few more little dark shapes coming in here. Now every time you do this, interlock. If you've got a leaf going this way, make a shape going the opposite way. Very easy to figure out how to do it. If you have a shape going this way, make a shape going the other way. Makes it real simple. It's the old cruciform composition. Can't go wrong. As long as you interlock, overlap, do counter movement, it should work quite well. Now I do have kind of a dead little blue next to a pink. This is kind of risky, but you know what? I'm going to put a little pink in here. I might be sorry, but I think it's going to be okay. Pull a little bit of that pink out here. Maybe I'll put a little pink in here. When you do a designer painting, these don't have to be anything. They can just be a repeat of the color. So this has got a lot of sweetness to it with the pink and blue and all. But I think we're ready to stop. And on this one I decided to put just a little bit of salt. And whenever I put salt in, I put it in my light areas. Like I wouldn't dream of putting salt in this beautiful solid blue, which is kind of my dark. So what I would do is I would put a little salt and I would line it up where my light is. So I have a very slight light here and here, very slight light coming in here. And that's it. So I've got just a little bit of salt. We'll see what that does when this dries. While you're looking at the finished painting here, I took off all the masking and softened the edges with my handy dandy little stiff brush. And now the very last thing, because we have these breakouts, very often you'll have a few little dings. And I do have a few, just for you, so I can clean them up. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take some Q-tips and some clean water and show you how to clean up a couple of these little spots. There's a red one here and a blue one here. Now very often when people have a spot like this, they'll take a piece of tissue, wet it, and they'll just simply drive that spot in really good. That is a bad way to do it. Let me show you a good way. A good way is to take a brand new Q-tip and with a very soft, gentle sawing motion and a gentle turning motion, you can always have a clean surface to work on. Now this works best, of course, with non-staining colors. I have no idea if, I'm pretty sure that was Permanent Rose, which is a non-staining color. And there we are, back to the white of the paper. Now you wouldn't do that with phthalo green or alizarin crimson or some of those colors that are truly staining colors. But for what we're doing here, it's perfect. And always take another Q-tip. So I'm going to work on this little blue spot over here with this gentle sawing motion and always turning the Q-tip. See how the soiled part is coming up. Going to go to the other side. Again, a nice gentle sawing motion. Look at that, clean as a whistle. Yes! Now if you happen to get into something extremely close, I've got a spot over here. It's very close to the edge of my taped edge and I don't want to destroy that. And I'm not sure what that color, if it's staining or not. Then what I do is I take a razor blade and I simply hold it with the flat edge. And what you do is you just simply take away the top layer of paper. Look at that. No moisture involved at all. You just clean it right up. And so you can go around and just clean up every little ding on your paper this way. In fact, sometimes I don't use moisture at all. I would just simply come in. This is where my tape overlapped. That very often is an area where you'll have a little leakage. So you can see in a very short time we'll have absolutely white edges. So let's take a look at this. It's a finished painting. Of course we have to look at it in a mat, even if it's a dirty mat. This is my working mat. But there you have, lesson number 3 complete. I have to say I'm fairly pleased with it. I like the yellows that are coming through here in this nice serpentine kind of movement, and the out of focus things are just enough. I'm not sure I added much with these little dark spotty shapes. I may even take my this damp Q-tip and just lighten them a bit. I think they got a little on the dark side. So see, the Q-tip is also kind of handy for that too, just to lighten the color. So I think I like that even better. So this is a wrap up for the video, and I just wanted to remind you that this technique is so versatile. Now we did it, I concentrated on floral design. But remember, it will work for anything, any subject that you want to paint on dry paper and conserve it, and then do a nice wet background. Just go for it. Happy painting, everybody.